A fog-draped letter arrives, pulling Hercule Poirot into a 16-year-old murder mystery. Was Caroline Crale, convicted of poisoning her artist husband, Amyas, truly guilty? Her daughter Carla begs Poirot to unravel the truth. 5 suspects. The 5 little pigs hold the key. A jealous friend, a reclusive herbalist, a scorned lover, a loyal governess, and a troubled sister. Each hides a secret. Each twists the past. Can Poirot's little grey cells pierce the shadows of love, betrayal, and sacrifice to reveal a killer? Or will the truth stay buried forever? Dive into this retrospective riddle where every clue sings and every lie stings. Chapter 1. The letter from the past. The fog clung to London like a conspirator's cloak, muffling the clatter of horse-drawn cabs and the distant chime of Big Ben. It was a November afternoon in 1941, and the city, battered yet unbowed by the Blitz, wore its scars with a stubborn dignity. At 56B Whitehaven Mansions, Hercule Poirot sat in his immaculate study, a sanctuary of order amidst the chaos of war. The room was a study in precision, polished mahogany desk, neatly arranged bookshelves, and a silver tea service gleaming under the soft glow of a crystal chandelier. Poirot, impeccably dressed in a pinstripe suit, adjusted his moustache with a delicate flick, his green eyes scanning a letter from a solicitor he had received that morning. The letter was intriguing, not for its content but for its curious blend of urgency and reticence. It requested his presence at a meeting with a young woman named Carla Lemarchant, who sought his aid in a matter of utmost personal importance. Poirot's curiosity, that insatiable spark that had unraveled countless mysteries, flickered to life. He glanced at the ormolu clock on the mantelpiece. 3:45 p.m. The young lady was due in 15 minutes. He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled, and allowed his mind to wander. A personal matter in wartime. Perhaps a lost heirloom, a family secret, or his lips curled slightly a crime, cloaked in the mists of the past. The doorbell chimed, precise and melodious, pulling Poirot from his reverie. He rose, smoothing his jacket, and called out, "Entrez, s'il vous plaît." His valet, George, ushered in a young woman whose presence seemed to shift the room's atmosphere. Carla Lemarchant was no more than 21, tall and striking, with auburn hair pinned in a practical yet elegant chignon. Her navy coat was damp from the fog, and her hazel eyes held a mixture of determination and vulnerability. She carried a small leather satchel, clutching it as if it were a lifeline. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. My name is Carla Lemarchant, and I've come about a matter that has haunted me all my life." Poirot gestured to a cushioned chair opposite his desk. "Mademoiselle, please be seated. You are welcome in the home of Hercule Poirot. Tell me, what is this matter that brings such weight to your eye?" Carla sat, her posture rigid, and opened her satchel, withdrawing a folded letter yellowed at the edges. "This," she said, handing it to him, "is from my mother." Caroline Crale. She wrote it before she died in prison 16 years ago. She was convicted of murdering my father, Amyas Crale, but she was innocent, Monsieur Poirot. This letter is her plea to me, and now to use to prove it." Poirot's eyebrows arched, a silent acknowledgment of the gravity of her words. He unfolded the letter with care, as if handling a relic. The handwriting was elegant, though the ink had faded, and the words carried a quiet desperation. "My dearest Carla, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you are grown. They say I killed your father, but it is a lie. I loved him, despite his flaws, and I would never have taken his life. The truth lies with the 5 who were there that day: Philip, Meredith, Elsa, Cecilia, and Angela. They are your 5 little pigs, my darling, each with their own tale. Find them, uncover their truths, and you will find mine. I trust you to restore my name, for your sake and for justice. Your loving mother, Caroline Poirot." Read the letter. Twice his lips pursed, his mind already dissecting its implications. 5 little pigs," he murmured, the nursery rhyme surfacing like a forgotten melody. "This little piggy went to market. This little piggy stayed at home." He looked up at Carla, his gaze piercing yet kind. "Mademoiselle, this is a most extraordinary request. A murder, 16 years past. The courts have spoken. The evidence was weighed. Why now? And why Hercule Poirot?" Carla leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly. "Because I was 5 when she died, Monsieur Poirot. I was sent to Canada to live with my aunt, raised as Carla Le Marchant, not Carla Crale, to escape the scandal. I only received this letter last month, when I turned 21. My mother's name is a shadow over my life. I'm engaged to a good man, John Rattery, but he doesn't know the truth about my past. I can't build a future on lies. I need to know. I need the world to know that my mother was innocent." Poirot nodded, his expression softening. "And these 5 little pigs, who are they, and what is their connection to the crime?" Carla took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for a painful recitation. "They were the people at Alderbury, our estate in Devon, the summer my father died. Philip Blake, my father's best friend, a stockbroker who was always at the house. Meredith Blake, his brother, a quiet man who lived nearby and dabbled in herbs. Elsa Greer, the woman my father was painting, and, I'm told, his lover Cecilia Williams, my governess, who looked after me and my Aunt Angela, and Angela Warren, my mother's younger sister, who was only 15 then. They all testified at the trial. They all said things that condemned her." Poirot's fingers tapped lightly on the desk, a rhythm that matched the ticking of his mind and the crime itself. "Tell me, mademoiselle, what do they say happened?" "To Amyas Crale." Carla's voice wavered, but she pressed on. "My father was a painter, brilliant but difficult. He was working on a portrait of Elsa at Alderbury. They say my mother was jealous, that she poisoned him with quinine, a poison from hemlock. He drank it in a glass of beer while painting in the garden. By the time they found him, he was dead. My mother admitted to giving him the beer, but she swore it wasn't poisoned. The jury didn't believe her. She was convicted and died in prison a year later. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind conjuring the scene. A sunlit garden, a canvas splashed with color, a glass of beer glinting with malice. "Cognac," he said softly, "a poison most rare, most precise. And your mother, she confessed to nothing more than delivering the beer." "Yes," Carla said, her voice breaking. "She said she loved him, that she would never hurt him. But the evidence, the bottle, the testimony, it was overwhelming. I was too young to understand. But now, I can't let her memory be tarnished. I need you, Monsieur Poirot. They say you see what others miss, that you can unravel the past." Poirot leaned back, his gaze drifting to the window where the fog pressed against the glass like a silent witness. The challenge was immense. A case long closed, witnesses scattered, evidence faded. Yet the letter, with its plea and its nursery rhyme, stirred something in him. It was not just a mystery, but a riddle of human nature, of love and betrayal, of truths buried beneath 16 years of silence. "Mademoiselle," he said at last, "Hercule Poirot does not take such matters lightly. To investigate a crime so old, it is to chase shadows in a storm. But your mother's words, they speak to me. This 5 little pigs, it is a curious frame, Nan. Each with their story, each with their secrets. I will take your case, but I must warn you. The truth, it is not always kind. It may reveal pain. As much as it absolves." Carla's eyes shone with tears, but her jaw set with resolve. "I'm ready for the truth, whatever it is. I owe her that." Poirot rose, his movements deliberate, and crossed to a small cabinet where he kept his case files. He withdrew a fresh notebook, its pages crisp and expectant. "Then we begin. Tell me, mademoiselle, everything you know of that summer at Alderbury. Leave nothing out, the smallest detail. It may be the key." Carla hesitated, then began to speak, her words painting a vivid picture of a lost world. Alderbury was a sprawling estate on the Devon coast, its gardens wild with roses and its cliffs overlooking a restless sea. Amyas Crale, her father, was a man of contradictions, charming yet selfish, devoted to his art yet reckless with hearts. Caroline, her mother, was fiery and loyal, her love for Amyas a flame that burned despite his affair with Elsa. The 5 suspects, Carla recalled, were like planets orbiting her parents' volatile sun, each drawn into the drama of that fatal summer. Philip Blake was always laughing, but it was a hard laugh, like he was hiding something, Carla said, her memory sharpened by years of reflection. Meredith was quieter, always in his greenhouse, mixing potions. Elsa, she was beautiful, like a painting herself, but cold. Cecilia was strict but kind to me, always reading to me from Shakespeare. And Angelucci was wild, always running off to the cliffs, quoting poetry and arguing with Amyas. Poirot listened intently, his pen scratching notes in precise, elegant script. The nursery rhyme echoed in his mind, each piggy a piece of the puzzle, This little piggy went to market Philip, the worldly stockbroker. This little piggy stayed at home, Meredith, the reclusive herbalist. This little piggy had roast beef Elsa, indulged and ambitious. This little piggy had none Cecilia, austere and dutiful. This little piggy cried wee Angela, young and emotional. The rhyme was no mere whimsy. It was a map, a structure to the chaos of human motives. As Carla spoke, Poirot's study seemed to fade, replaced by the sun-drenched lawns of Alderbury. He imagined Amyas at his easel, his brush dancing over the canvas, Elsa posing with a knowing smile, Caroline watching from the terrace with pain in her eyes. The beer glass, cold and innocuous, sat on a table beside the easel, its contents a silent assassin who had placed the quinine there. And why had Caroline taken the blame? The clock struck 4, its chime pulling Poirot back to the present. Carla paused, her face pale but resolute. "That's all I remember," she said. "I was so young, and they kept me away from the trial. But I know my mother wasn't a murderer. She loved my father, even when he hurt her." Poirot closed his notebook, his expression unreadable. "Mademoiselle, your memories are a canvas, and already I see the outlines of a picture. Port to paint it fully. I must speak to these 5 piglets. Their stories, they will differ none. Each will see the past through their own heart. I will ask them to write their accounts, to commit their memories to paper. From these Hercule Poirot, will find the truth." Carla frowned, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. "But what if they lie? It's been so long, and they have no reason to help me." Poirot smiled, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "Ah, mademoiselle, to lie is human, but to lie to Hercule Poirot is to play a dangerous game. I have a method, you see. The little grey cells, they observe not only words, but silences, not only truths, but the spaces between them. I will find your mother's truth, or my name is not Hercule Poirot." Carla managed a small smile, the first since she had entered. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I don't know how to repay you." "There is no need," Poirot said, waving a hand. "The pursuit of justice, it is its own reward. But now you must rest. This journey, it will be long, and you must be strong. Leave me your address, and I will contact you when I have news." Carla scribbled her address, modest flat in Bloomsbury, and rose, clutching her satchel. "I'll wait for your call. Monsieur Poirot, please don't let her down." As she left, the fog seemed to swallow her figure, leaving Poirot alone with the letter and his thoughts. He reread Caroline's words, tracing the ink with a fingertip. "The 5 little pigs," he murmured, a riddle wrapped in a nursery rhyme. "'Twas interessant." He crossed to his bookshelf, pulling down a volume of English nursery rhymes. The simplicity of this little piggy belied its potential as a cipher for motive and opportunity. Poirot's mind churned, already forming a plan. He would track down each suspect, request their written accounts, and compare their stories for inconsistencies. The past was a locked room, but Hercule Poirot had the key his little grey cells. The chapter closed with Poirot standing at his window, gazing into the fog. The mystery of Caroline Crale was no ordinary case. It was a tapestry of love, betrayal, and sacrifice, woven 16 years ago and now unraveling at his touch. He felt the thrill of the chase, the certainty that the truth, however elusive, would not escape him. With a final glance at the letter, he whispered, "A bean, Madame Crale. Let us see what secrets your piglets hide." Chapter 2. The 5 little piglets. Hercule Poirot's London flat was a sanctuary of order. Its polished mahogany desk reflecting the soft glow of a Tiffany lamp. The air carried a faint scent of lavender from a crystal bowl on the sideboard, a touch of elegance that soothed the mind. Outside, the drizzle of a November afternoon tapped against the windows, cocooning the room in quiet contemplation. Poirot sat in his high-backed chair, his small, neat hands folded over a dossier labeled Crale Case 1949. The file was thick, its edges frayed from years of storage, but to Poirot it was a treasure chest of secrets waiting to be unlocked. Carla, the merchant, had left an hour ago, her earnest plea still echoing in his ears. "Prove my mother was innocent, Monsieur Poirot. She didn't kill my father." Her words had stirred something in him, a spark of curiosity, fanned by the peculiar nursery rhyme she'd mentioned. This little piggy, 5 suspects, 5 piglets, each tied to a line of the rhyme. It was, as Poirot had murmured to himself, bare retrospective riddle, a puzzle preserved in the amber of memory. Now, with the case file before him, he was ready to meet these piglets, to dissect their stories and uncover the truth buried beneath 16 years of silence. He opened the dossier, his fingers tracing the typed pages. The Crale case had been a sensation in its day, splashed across tabloids with headlines like "Artist Poisoned by Jealous Wife" and "Tragedy at Alderbury Estate." Amyas Crale, a celebrated painter, had been found dead in his garden studio, poisoned by quinine, a rare toxin derived from hemlock. His wife, Caroline Crale, was convicted of the murder, her motive pinned on jealousy over Amyas's affair with his model, Elsa Greer. Caroline died in prison a year later, leaving behind a daughter, Carla, and a letter proclaiming her innocence. The evidence had seemed airtight. Caroline's fingerprints on the beer bottle that delivered the poison, her heated argument with Amyas hours before his death, and her own vague confession. Yet Carla's faith in her mother's letter had swayed Poirot. Could the truth have been so neatly packaged? The file listed 5 witnesses present at Alderbury on the day of the murder. August 15th, 1949. Poirot leaned back, his eyes narrowing as he recited their names like a litany. Philip Blake, Meredith Blake, Elsa Greer, Cecilia Williams, Angela Warren. Each was a piece of the puzzle, their testimonies forming the scaffolding of Caroline's conviction. But scaffolding, Poirot knew, could hide cracks. He reached for a notepad and a silver fountain pen, sketching a table to organize his thoughts. At the top, he wrote the 5 little piglets, underlining it with a flourish. Below, he assigned each suspect a line from the nursery rhyme, a whimsical structure that felt oddly fitting. Philip Blake. This little piggy went to market. Meredith Blake. This little piggy stayed at home. Elsa Greer. This little piggy had roast beef. Cecilia Williams. This little piggy had none. Angela Warren. This little piggy cried wee, all the way home. The rhyme, Poirot mused, was more than a childish chant. It was a psychological map, each line hinting at a suspect's character or role in the drama. Philip, the stockbroker, always chasing wealth off to market. Meredith, the reclusive herbalist, tethered to his estate staying home. Elsa, the lover, indulging in Amyas's affection-savoring roast beef. Cecilia, the governess, austere and overlooked, having none. Angela, the younger sister, emotional and scarred, crying all the way home. The rhyme's rhythm pulsed in his mind, a metronome for his investigation. Poirot turned to the first page of the case summary, his eyes scanning the details of Alderbury, the Crale estate in Devon. The house was a sprawling Georgian manor, its gardens lush with roses and yew hedges. Amyas's studio, a glass-walled pavilion, overlooked a lily pond, its isolation perfect for both art and secrecy. On that fateful day, the household had been a volatile mix of egos and emotions. Amyas painting Elsa in a feverish burst of creativity. Caroline wrestling with her husband's infidelity. Philip and Meredith, old friends of Amyas, visiting for the weekend. Cecilia tutoring young Angela. And Angela herself, a tempestuous teenager, caught in the crossfire of her sister's crumbling marriage. The police report described the murder with clinical precision. Amyas had been drinking beer in his studio, a habit during long painting sessions. The bottle, laced with cognac, was delivered by Caroline, who claimed she'd fetched it from the kitchen. Within an hour, Amyas was dead, his body slumped in a wicker chair, paintbrush still in hand. The poison, odorless and tasteless, was traced to Meredith's laboratory, where he experimented with herbal remedies. Caroline's fingerprints were on the bottle, and a witness Selfa testified too, hearing Caroline threaten Amyas, "If you leave me, I'll make you regret it." The trial was swift, the jury unanimous. Yet Poirot's instincts whispered that the truth was not so simple. He flipped to the witness statements, each a snapshot of the day frozen in time. Philip Blake, then 32, described Amyas as a genius, with a devil's charm, but called Caroline a shrew who couldn't let him breathe. Merritt, 35, spoke of the Conian theft with guilt, admitting his lab was unsecured. Elsa, only 20, painted Caroline as a vengeful wife, her testimony dripping with venom. Cecilia, 40, noted Caroline's unstable behavior, while Angela, just 15, offered a rambling account of the day, her words clouded by grief. Poirot tapped his pen against the table, sensing the biases woven into each narrative. Memory, he knew, was a fickle artist, painting over facts with emotion. To understand these piglets, Poirot needed more than their words on paper. He needed their voices, their gestures, their hesitations. He decided to interview each one, to stir the sediment of their memories and watch what surfaced. But first he would visit Alderbury, to walk the grounds where the tragedy unfolded. The estate was now owned by Meredith Blake, who lived there alone, a recluse tending his herbs. Poirot made a note to arrange a visit, his mind already picturing the studio, the pond, the paths where secrets might linger, as he closed the dossier. His gaze fell on a photograph tucked into the Feeler Group portrait taken at Alderbury the summer before the murder. Amyas stood at the center, his dark hair tousled, a cigarette dangling from his lips. Caroline, beside him, looked weary, her smile strained. Philip and Meredith flanked them, their expressions guarded. Elsa, radiant in a sundress, leaned against Amyas, her eyes bold. Cecilia stood apart, her posture stiff, while Angela, a gangly teenager, grinned mischievously. Poirot studied their faces, searching for clues in their eyes, their body language. "What did you see?" he murmured. "What did you hide?" The telephone rang, jolting him from his thoughts. It was Carla, her voice urgent. "Monsieur Poirot, I found something in my mother's Thingser diary fragment. It mentions the Piglets, but it's cryptic. Shall I send it to you?" Poirot's pulse quickened. "Oui, mademoiselle, at once. Every word may be a key." As he hung up, he felt the case tightening around him, its threads pulling taut. The diary could be a breakthrough, a glimpse into Caroline's mind. He imagined her writing in secret, her pen scratching out truths too dangerous to speak, while awaiting the diary. Poirot turned to his bookshelf, pulling down a volume on poisons. Coniine, he read, was a paralytic toxin, causing death by respiratory failure. Its source, spotted hemlock, grew wild in Devon, but Meredith's lab was the likely origin. The choice of poison intrigued Poirot. Why coniine, so obscure, when a knife or gun would have been simpler? The answer, he suspected, lay in the killer's psychology, desire for subtlety, for control. He jotted a note, poison as performance. The next morning Poirot boarded a train to Devon, the countryside blurring past in shades of grey and green. Alderbury was a 2-hour journey, and he used the time to review his plan. He would tour the estate, question Meredith, and gauge his demeanor. Meredith's role as the piglet who stayed at home fascinated Poirot. Was he a passive bystander, or had his quiet presence concealed a deeper involvement? The train's rhythm lulled Poirot into a meditative state, his mind sifting through possibilities. At Alderbury station, a local taxi carried him to the estate. The gates were rusted, the drive overgrown with nettles. The manor loomed ahead, its windows dark, a far cry from the vibrant hub described in the file. Meredith greeted him at the door, a tall man with stooped shoulders and silver hair. His eyes, pale blue, held a flicker of unease. "Monsieur Poirot, I didn't expect, but please, come in." His voice was soft, almost apologetic. The interior was a time capsule, its furnishings unchanged since 1949. Meredith led Poirot to a drawing room, where a fire crackled in the hearth. "You're here about Amyas," Meredith said, sinking into an armchair. "I've dreaded this day." Poirot smiled, his tone gentle but probing. "Monsieur Blake, the past does not rest easily. Tell me of that summer, of the people who filled this house." Meredith's account began haltingly, painting a picture of a tense weekend. Amyas was consumed by his painting of Elsa working. Late into the night, Caroline was withdrawn, her eyes shadowed with pain. Philip, Meredith's younger brother, was jovial but restless, needling Amyas about his affairs. Cecilia kept to her duties, while Angela roamed the grounds, her mood swings, unsettling the household. It was like a storm brewing, Meredith said. I felt helpless. Poirot steered the conversation to the laboratory, a stone outbuilding behind the manor. Meredith admitted the Conian was his, extracted for a botanical study. I kept it locked, but someone broke in. I blamed Caroline, but I never saw proof. His hands trembled as he spoke, and Poirot noted the guilt in his voice. "Did you love her, Monsieur Blake?" Poirot asked softly. Meredith's face flushed. "I admired her. She was kind, despite her pain. But love, no." They walked to the studio, a glass structure half claimed by ivy. Inside, the air was stale, the easel still standing where Amyas had worked. Poirot imagined him there, brush in hand, unaware of the poison in his beer. He asked Meredith about the nursery rhyme, watching for a reaction. "Carla mentioned it," Meredith said, frowning. "She was a child then, always chanting rhymes. I never thought it meant anything." But his eyes darted away, and Poirot sensed a lie as they returned to the house. Poirot noticed a yew hedge near the studio, its berries bright against the gloom. He paused, recalling that yew was toxic. Could it be a red herring, or had the killer considered multiple poisons? He filed the thought away, his mind already turning to the other Piglets. Philip Blake, now in London, would be next. His testimony had been the most damning, and Poirot was eager to test its strength. Back in the drawing-room, Meredith offered tea, his hospitality strained. Poirot accepted, using the moment to observe his host. Meredith's hands were stained, with soil, his nails chipped marks of a man who found solace in the earth. "You stay at home, like the piglet in the rhyme," Poirot said lightly. Meredith laughed, a brittle sound. "I suppose I do. But home can be a prison, Monsieur Poirot." The visit ended with Meredith promising to write a detailed recollection. Revive the day. Poirot left Alderbury with more questions than answers, but the estate's atmosphere had sharpened his focus. The diary fragment arrived that evening, a single page in Caroline's elegant script. It read, "The Piglets circle, each with their own hunger. Philip craves power, Meredith peace, Elsa love, Cecilia truth, Angela freedom. But who fed the poison? I fear the answer lies in what I cannot say." Poirot read it thrice, each word a spark in his mind. Caroline had known something, but her silence protected someone. Who? The next day, Poirot met his old friend, Superintendent Hale, at Scotland Yard. Hale, now retired, had worked the Crale case. Over coffee, he shared an overlooked detail. A groundskeeper had reported seeing Angela near the laboratory days before the murder, but the lead was dismissed. She was a kid, Hale said. No one thought her capable. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The young are often underestimated, mon ami. Poirot returned to his flat, the case spreading before him like a chessboard. He added the groundskeeper's sighting to his notes, circling Angela's name. The piglet who cried all the way home, could her tears hide guilt? He planned his interviews. Philip in London, Elsa in Paris, Cecilia in Oxford, Angela in Cairo. Each would face his questions. Their memories probed for cracks. As night fell, Poirot stood by his window, watching the rain streak the glass. The nursery rhyme played in his mind, its cadence a challenge. 5 little piglets, he whispered, and one holds the key. The case was alive now, its pulse quickening. With each clue, he felt the thrill of the hunt, his grey cells dancing to the rhythm of truth. Chapter 3. Philip Blake, who went to market Hercule Poirot, adjusted his immaculate pinstripe suit. The morning light filtering through the heavy drapes of his London flat, casting geometric shadows across the polished mahogany floor. The air carried a faint whiff of lavender from the wax he'd used to tame his moustache, a ritual that steadied his mind for the day's work. In his hand, he held a neatly typed dossier on the Crale case, its pages crisp with the weight of 16-year-old secret. The nursery rhyme, "This little piggy," echoed in his thoughts, each line a cipher for the 5 suspects tied to Amyas Crale's murder. Today, he would begin with the first piglet, Philip Blake, the stockbroker who, in the rhyme's playful cadence, went to market. Poirot's polished shoes clicked against the cobblestones as he stepped into the bustling heart of London's financial district. The city was alive with the clatter of typewriters, the shouts of traders, and the hum of ambition. Philip Blake's office, perched on the top floor of a sleek, modern building, overlooked Threadneedle Street, its glass windows reflecting the grey sprawl of the capital. Poirot's appointment had been arranged with some difficulty. Philip was a busy man. His secretary had insisted, but the mention of Amyas Crale had secured a grudging half-hour. The elevator ride was silent save for the soft ding of passing floors. Poirot's mind churned, piecing together what he knew of Philip Blake, a childhood friend of Amyas. Philip had been at Alderbury, the Crale estate, on the day of the murder. His testimony at the trial had been damning, painting Caroline Crale as a jealous wife driven to poison her husband over his affair with Elsa Greer. Yet Poirot, ever skeptical of surface truths, suspected Philip's account held more than it revealed. The man who went to market was practical, ambitious, perhaps ruthless qualities that could obscure the truth as easily as they could illuminate it. The office door bore a brass plaque, "Philip Blake, Senior Partner, Blake and Sons Investments." Inside, the room was a study in calculated opulence, mahogany paneling, a Persian rug, and a desk the size of a small boat. Philip Blake stood to greet him, a tall man in his late 40s, his hair silvered at the temples, his handshake firm, but perfunctory. His suit was tailored to perfection, his cufflinks glinting with understated wealth. Yet his eyes, a sharp hazel, betrayed a flicker of unease as they met Poirot's. Monsieur Blake. Poirot began, settling into a leather chair. I am most grateful for your time. You understand, I presume, why I am here. Philip's smile was tight, more a baring of teeth than a gesture of warmth. Betrayal business, I gather. Carla stirred up the past, hasn't she? I told her it's a fool's errand, but she's stubborn. Like her mother, he leaned back, crossing his arms. What do you want from me, Poirot? I said everything I had to say at the trial. Poirot tilted his head, his fingers steepled. The truth, monsieur, is like a fine wine. It matures with time. I seek your recollections, fresh and unfiltered, of that day at Alderbury. The trial, it was 16 years ago. The memory, it shifts. None. Perhaps you see things now that you did not then. Philip's jaw tightened, but he nodded, gesturing to a decanter of whiskey on a sideboard. Drink. Nan, mercy, I prefer. To keep the mind clear. Poirot's tone was polite but firm, his eyes never leaving Philip's face. Philip poured himself a glass, the amber liquid catching the light. Suit yourself. Where do you want to start? With Amyas, Poirot said smoothly. Tell me of your friend, his character, his passions, his flaws. Philip took a sip, his gaze drifting to the window. Amyas was larger than life, brilliant painter. You know that. Could charm the birds from the trees. But he was reckless, always chasing the next thrill-out women ideas. He didn't care who got hurt. His voice carried a trace of bitterness, quickly masked. We grew up together, you know. Summers at Alderbury, fishing in the creek, stealing apples from the orchard. He was always the leader, the one who dared. I was the one who cleaned up his messes. Poirot noted the edge in Philip's tone, the hint of resentment. And Caroline, his wife, what was she to you? Philip's fingers tightened around his glass. Caroline was complicated, beautiful in her way, but sharp. Amyas. But she couldn't handle his wandering eye. When Elsa came along, it broke something in her. She was jealous, Poirot. Dangerously so. Dangerously. Poirot's eyebrows lifted. You believe, then, that she poisoned him? Philip met his gaze, unflinching. The evidence was clear. Cognac in the beer she gave him. Her fingerprints on the bottle. She didn't deny it, not really. She just stood there in court, silent as a ghost. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but probing. And yet, monsieur, you were there that day. You saw the events unfold. Tell me, what do you remember? Not the trial's version, but your own. Philip hesitated, his eyes narrowing. He set the glass down, the clink loud in the quiet room. It was hot that August. Alderbury was a mad painting like a man possessed. Elsa posing for him, Caroline stalking about like a wounded animal. Meredith was there, fussing with his herbs, and Angela, that brat, was always underfoot. Cecilia, the governess, kept trying to keep things civil, but it was a powder keg. Poirot's pencil scratched against his notebook. And you, monsieur, where were you when Amyas died? Philip's lips twitched, as if debating a lie. In the garden, mostly. I'd been talking to Amyas earlier, by the bench where he was painting. He was drinking that damned beer, laughing with Elsa. I left them around noon, went to the house to make a call. Business, you know. When I came back, he was gone, slumped over, dead. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A call, you say? To whom? Philip waved a hand dismissively. A client. Some deal I was closing. It's not relevant. Everything, monsieur, is relevant. Poirot's tone was gentle but unyielding. The time, it matters. Amyas drank the poisoned beer shortly after noon. None. If you were on the telephone, who else was near him? Philip frowned, his fingers drumming on the desk. Elsa was there, of course. Caroline came down with the beer. I saw her hand it to him, smiling like nothing was wrong. Meredith was poking around his lab, and Angela was, I don't know, probably sulking somewhere. Cecilia was in the house, I think. Poirot's pencil paused. You saw Caroline give him the beer. This is certain. Philip nodded, but his eyes flicked away, just for a moment, clear as day. And yet, Poirot mused, the memory, it is a slippery thing. You were his friend, monsieur. Did you not find it strange, this sudden death? Did you not question? Philip's laugh was short, bitter. Question. Of course I did. But the police had their story, and Caroline didn't fight it. What was I supposed to do? Play detective? He leaned forward, his voice hardening. Look, Poirot, I liked Amyas, but he was a fool. He pushed Caroline too far, and she snapped. That's the truth. Poirot tilted his head, studying Philip as if he were a painting with hidden brushstrokes. The man's confidence was polished, but there were cracks, hesitations, glances that betrayed unease. Monsieur Blake, I ask one favor. Write for me your account of that day. Every detail, every moment, as you recall it now. The mind, it reveals new truths when pressed to the page. Philip's brow furrowed. Write it. What's the point? I've told you everything. Poirot smiled, a small knowing curve of his lips. Humor me, monsieur. The written word, it has a way of clarifying the fog of memory. Philip shrugged, clearly annoyed but unwilling to argue. Fine. I'll have my secretary type something up. You'll have it by tomorrow. Excellent. Poirot rose, smoothing his coat. One last question, monsieur. The nursery rhyme, this little piggy. It was mentioned by Mademoiselle Carla. Did it ever come up at Alderbury? Perhaps in jest, among the guests. Philip's expression darkened, a shadow crossing Pris's face. That silly rhyme, I don't know. Maybe Angela was chanting it. She was always spouting nonsense. Why does it matter? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Everything, monsieur, matters. He tipped his hat and turned to leave, but not before catching the faint flush of color on Philip's cheeks. The London air was crisp as Poirot stepped back onto the street, his mind buzzing like a hive. Philip Blake's account was vivid, almost too vivid, as if rehearsed. The stockbroker had painted Caroline as the villain with the ease of a man used to closing deals, but his story felt curated, its edges too neat. The mention of the telephone call was particularly curious business, Philip had said, yet he'd offered no details. And that fleeting glance, when asked about the beer bottle, Poirot's instincts whispered of omission, perhaps deception. He hailed a taxi, directing it to his flat, where he intended to cross-reference Philip's story with the case file. The dossier, provided by Carla, included trial transcripts, witness statements, and a map of Alderbury's sprawling estate. Poirot's fingers itched to spread it across his desk, to trace the movements of each piglet on that fatal day. Philip's claim that he saw Caroline hand Amyas the beer was significant, but the timing troubled Poirot. If Philip was on a call, how could he be certain of the moment the bottle changed hands? And why the unease when the nursery rhyme was mentioned? Back at his flat, Poirot poured himself a tisane, the steam curling like a question mark. He opened the dossier, his eyes scanning Philip's trial testimony. It was much the same as today's account: Caroline's jealousy, Amyas's charm, by the beer bottle as the instrument of death. Yet there was a detail missing from Philip's verbal recounting at the trial. He'd mentioned seeing Caroline wipe the bottle with her handkerchief before handing it to Amyas. The gesture had been interpreted as her attempt to erase fingerprints, but Philip hadn't mentioned it today. An oversight or a deliberate omission? Poirot sipped his tisane, his mind turning to the nursery rhyme. This little piggy went to market. Philip, the pragmatic businessman, fit the role perfectly. But what had he truly been buying? The day loyalty, silence, or something more sinister? The rhyme, Poirot suspected, was more than a child's game. It was a lens through which to view the suspect's motives. Philip's resentment of Amyas, hinted at in his tone, suggested envy, perhaps a rivalry that ran deeper than friendship. The telephone rang, shattering Poirot's reverie. It was Carla Le Marchant, her voice urgent. "Monsieur Poirot, have you spoken to Philip yet? Did he tell you anything new?" Poirot's tone was measured. "Mademoiselle, I have begun the journey. Monsieur Blake has shared his memories, but the truth, it hides in the shadows. I have asked him to write his account. We shall see what emerges." Carla hesitated. "He never liked my mother. Be careful with him, monsieur. He's persuasive." Poirot smiled into the receiver. "Fear not, mademoiselle. Hercule Poirot is not so easily swayed. The little grey cells, they are already at work." Hanging up, Poirot returned to his notes, sketching a rough timeline of the day. Amyas had been painting in the garden, Elsa at his side, until noon. Caroline brought the beer shortly after. Philip claimed to be on a call, yet saw the exchange. Meredith was in his laboratory, Angela somewhere on the grounds, Cecilia in the house. The poison, coniine, had been identified in the beer, but the bottle's handling remained a puzzle. Who had touched it before Caroline, and why had Philip omitted the handkerchief detail? As evening fell, Poirot lit a lamp and opened a book of nursery rhymes, a gift from a past case. He read this little piggy aloud, his voice soft in the quiet room. This little piggy went to market. This little piggy stayed home. Each line conjured an image of the suspects, their roles crystallizing. in his mind. Philip, the market-goer, was a man of action, but his actions that day were unclear. Had he truly been on a call, or was he closer to the scene than he admitted? A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. A courier delivered an envelope marked with Philip Blake's letterhead. Inside was a single sheet, typed in crisp precision. Dear Monsieur Poirot, as requested, my account of the 16th of August, 1929, at Aldebury. I arrived at the estate the previous day, staying as Amyas's guest. That morning, Amyas was painting Elsa in the garden, his usual obsessive self. I spoke with him around 11:30, discussing a potential investment in an art gallery. He was distracted, drinking beer and laughing with Elsa. I left to make a business call from the house, returning around 12:15 to find him dead. Caroline had been there moments before, handing him the beer. I saw her wipe the bottle with her handkerchief, which struck me as odd. The rest you know from the trial. I hope this satisfies your curiosity. Yours, Philip Blake. Poirot's lips pursed. The handkerchief was there, after all, slipped into the written account as if an afterthought. Yet the timing 11:30 to 12:15 left a gap. Where was Philip during those crucial minutes? And why had he not mentioned the handkerchief in their conversation? The written word, as Poirot had hoped, had revealed a crack in Philip's polished facade. He set the letter aside, his mind racing. Philip Blake was a man who thrived on control, yet something about that day had unsettled him. The nursery rhyme, the handkerchief, the telephone call were pieces of a puzzle that did not yet fit. Poirot leaned back, closing his eyes, letting his little grey cells sift through the details. The truth, he knew, was there, hidden in the interstices of memory and motive. Tomorrow he would visit Meredith Blake, the piglet who stayed at home. But for now, Philip's account lingered like a shadow, its inconsistencies a challenge to Poirot's intellect. The market-goer had spoken, but his words were a transaction, not a confession. The riddle, it seemed, was only beginning to unfold. Chapter 4. Meredith Blake, who stayed at home. The train rattled through the English countryside, its rhythmic clatter a counterpoint to Hercule Poirot's thoughts. The dossier on his lap, dog-eared from repeated readings, held the bare bones. Bove the Crale case, Amyas Crale, painter, poisoned by Caroline Crale, wife, convicted. 5 suspects, each tethered to the nursery rhyme, this little piggy. Now Poirot was en route to Meredith Blake's estate in Devon, the second of the little piglets who had stayed at home, both literally and, perhaps, in the shadows of guilt. The station at Newton Abbot was a quaint affair, all red brick and hanging baskets spilling with petunias. A driver, a wiry man with a face like weathered oak, awaited Poirot with a sign bearing his name in neat copperplate. "Mr. Blake's sent me, sir," he said, tipping his cap. "Hop in. It's a fair drive to Thornfield Grange." Poirot settled into the back of the Arston, noting the driver's reticence. "You have worked long for Monsieur Blake?" he asked, his accent lending a musical lilt to the question. 10 years, give or take," the driver replied, eyes fixed on the winding lane. "Quiet man, Mr. Blake keeps to himself, mostly. Likes his plants, mourn people. If you'll pardon me saying, Poirot's moustache twitched. And 16 years ago, were you in his employ during the unfortunate events at Alderbury? The driver's knuckles whitened on the wheel. I was there. Terrible business. Don't much like to talk of it, sir. Poirot nodded, filing away the man's discomfort. The countryside unfurled around them, hedgerows stitching fields of emerald and gold. Soon the car turned onto a gravel drive flanked by ancient yews, leading to Thornfield Granger's sprawling Tudor manor, its half-timbered facade softened by climbing roses. The air carried the sharp tang of lavender and something earthier, like damp moss after rain. Meredith Blake awaited Poirot on the steps, a tall man in his late 50s, stooped as if bearing an invisible weight. His tweed jacket hung loosely, and his eyes, a faded blue, held a wary kindness. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, extending a hand, "I confess I was surprised by your letter. The past. It's a door I've tried to keep closed. Yet, Monsieur Blake, some doors must be opened to let in the light of truth," Poirot replied, his tone gentle but firm. "May we speak inside?" The drawing-room was a study in faded grandeur, heavy oak paneling, a fireplace carved with gargoyles, and shelves groaning under leather-bound volumes. A faint herbal scent lingered, emanating from a bundle of dried sage on the mantel. Meredith gestured to a pair of armchairs by a bay window overlooking a walled garden, where rows of plants stood in military precision. "Tea?" Meredith asked, hovering near a silver tray. "Merci, but no," Poirot said, settling into the chair. "I prefer to keep my mind unclouded by refreshment during such discussions. You know, I presume, why I am here." Meredith sank into the opposite chair, his fingers knotting together. "Carla Lemarchant. She wrote to me, too. Wants to clear her mother's name. I told her it's a fool's errand, but," he trailed off, staring at the garden, "Caroline was my friend. If there's a chance she was innocent, I owe her that much." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes gleaming like polished jet. "Then let us begin with the day of the murder, Monsieur Blake. Tell me, in your own words, what you saw, what you heard, what you felt." Meredith's gaze drifted to a point beyond the window, as if the past were a film flickering on the glass. It was August, swelteringly unbearable. Alderbury was alive with tension Mears and Caroline at odds, Elsa Greer flitting about like a moth drawn to his flame. I was at the house that morning, invited for lunch. My laboratory, you see, was just across the meadow from Alderbury. I'd been experimenting with conian, extracted from hemlock, fascinating plant, deadly in the wrong hands. Poirot's fingers steepled. "And it was from your laboratory that the poison was stolen." Meredith flinched, as if slapped. "So the police concluded. I kept the conian in a locked cabinet, but Caroline knew where I hid the key. She'd visited my lab often, curious. Bow my work. The prosecution said she took it the day before the murder. Yet you doubt this?" "None," Poirot pressed. noting the flicker of hesitation in Meredith's eyes. "I don't know what to believe," Meredith admitted. "Caroline was no killer. She was passionate, yes, fiercely protective of those she loved, Angela, especially, but to poison Amyas, it doesn't fit." Poirot tilted his head. "Tell me of that morning, every detail, s'il vous plaît." Meredith drew a shaky breath. "I arrived at Alderbury around 11. Amyas was in the garden, painting Elsa. She was posed on the terrace, all golden hair and defiance. Caroline was inside, fussing over lunch with Cecilia, the governess. Angela was sulking. Somewhere she'd quarreled with Amyas again. Philip, my brother, was there too, nursing a brandy and a grudge. He never liked how Amyas monopolized attention. And you?" Poirot asked. "Where were you when the argument erupted?" Meredith's brow furrowed. "Argument? There were so many. That day, it's hard to pin down. But you mean the one between Caroline and Amyas, I suppose." "I was in the drawing-room, leafing through a book on botany. Their voices carried through the open window sharp, like glass breaking. Caroline was pleading, Amyas dismissive, something about Elsa, about his art. Then it went quiet, and I thought, well, I thought it was over." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And when did you learn of Amyas's death?" "After lunch," Meredith said, his voice dropping. "We'd eaten in the dining-room cold meats, salad, nothing fancy. Amyas went back to his easel, said he needed to finish the painting. An hour later, Elsa screamed. I ran out and found him slumped in his chair, the beer bottle on the table. His face, God, his face was like marble. Caroline was there, staring, her hands shaking. She kept saying, 'It's my fault,' over and over." Poirot leaned back, digesting the account. "This beer bottle-it was the vessel for the cognac. We, who brought it to him." "Caroline," Meredith said, then hesitated. "At least, that's what everyone assumed. She'd been in and out of the garden, fetching things for Amyas. But I didn't see her hand it to him. None of us did. Not really." A silence settled, broken only by the distant caw of a rook. Poirot's fingers tapped a rhythm on the armrest. "Monsieur Blake, you speak of Caroline's character, her passion, yet you omit something, I think. A sentiment, perhaps, that colored your view of her." Meredith's face paled. "What are you implying?" "Only that the heart, it speaks louder than the mind at times," Poirot said softly. "You cared for Madame Crale, did you not? More than as a friend." Meredith stood abruptly, crossing to the fireplace. He gripped the mantel, his knuckles white. "You're perceptive, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, I loved her. Not that it mattered. Caroline only had eyes for Amyas, even when he broke her heart. I never told her, never would have. It wasn't my place." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And this love, it made you doubt her guilt, or perhaps fear for her innocence." Meredith turned, his eyes blazing. "I wanted to believe she was innocent, but the evidence, the cognac, the bottle, her own words, it was overwhelming. Yet there's a part of me, even now, that wonders if we missed something. If I missed something, Poirot rose, his movements deliberate. Let us visit this laboratory of yours, Monsieur Blake. I wish to see where the poison was kept. The laboratory was a converted stable behind the manor, its stone walls lined with shelves of jars and vials. A workbench held a microscope, a mortar and pestle, and a notebook filled with spidery handwriting. The air was thick with the scent of earth and chemicals, a heady mix that made Poirot's nose wrinkle. "Here," Meredith said, opening a wooden cabinet. Inside were rows of labeled bottles, their contents glowing faintly in the slanted light. The quinine was in a vial like these, sealed with wax. I noticed it missing the day after Amyas died. The police found the empty vial in the garden near the terrace. Poirot examined the cabinet, noting the locker simple brass affair easily picked, and the key. Where was it hidden? Meredith pointed to a loose stone in the wall. Behind there, not exactly Fort Knox, I know. Caroline saw me retrieve it once when she was helping me catalogue plants. She had a knack for noticing things. Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on a framed sketch above the workbencher, delicate rendering of a hemlock plant, its feathery leaves drawn with precision. "This drawing," he said, "it is yours." Meredith nodded. "A hobby. I sketched it years ago, before everything." Poirot studied the sketch, his mind racing. Hemlock, the source of quinine, was a plant of deception, beautiful yet deadly, much like the relationships at Alderbury. "Monsieur Blake," he said, turning, "I will ask you to do something. Write an account of that day, every detail you recall, no matter how trivial. Will you do this?" Meredith hesitated, then nodded. "If it helps, Carla, yes. I'll have it sent to you." As they returned to the manor, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the garden. Poirot paused by a bed of foxgloves, their bell-like flowers swaying in the breeze. "One last question, Monsieur Blake. On that day, did you see anyone else near your laboratory? Anyone who might have had access?" Meredith frowned, his memory straining. I'm not sure. There was a moment just before lunch when I stepped out for air. I thought I saw someone by the meadow near the path to Alderbury, a figure moving quickly. But it could have been a trick of the light. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Or perhaps, monsieur, it was the shadow of truth. Bark. In the drawing-room, Meredith reached for a decanter of sherry, then stopped. Instead, he crossed to a locked drawer in a bureau and withdrew a small object wrapped in cloth. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice low, "there's something I've kept all these years. I don't know if it matters, but—" He unwrapped the cloth, revealing a glass vial, its interior faintly clouded. "Quinine," he said. "I made a new batch after the trial to understand its potency. I've never used it, never dared. But it's a reminder of what happened, of what I might have prevented." Poirot took the vial, holding it to the light. The liquid inside was clear, almost innocent. Yet it carried the weight of a life extinguished, a family shattered. Monsieur Blake," he said, slipping the vial into his pocket. "This may yet speak to us." As the driver ferried Poirot back to the station, the detective's mind churned. Meredith's love for Caroline, his faltering memory, the figure by the meadow, the vial of cognac were threads in a tapestry of motive and misdirection. By the nursery rhyme echoed in his thoughts. This little piggy stayed at home. But had Meredith truly stayed at home, or had he wandered into the heart of the tragedy? The train to London awaited, its whistle piercing the dusk. Poirot boarded, the vial a cold weight in his pocket, and turned his gaze to the horizon. The truth, he knew, was out there, waiting to be unearthed, like a root in Meredith's garden. And Hercule Poirot would dig until he found it. The journey back to London was a blur of hedgerows and twilight, but Poirot's mind was alight with possibilities. Meredith Blake's account, though heartfelt, was riddled with gaps moments, where memory faltered or emotion clouded judgment. The laboratory, with its unlocked cabinet and hidden key, was a stage for theft, yet the figure in the meadow suggested another player, and the vial. Poirot's fingers brushed its outline in his pocket. It was a relic, a talisman of guilt, but also a clue to the poison's accessibility. In his flat that evening, Poirot spread the dossier across his desk, adding notes in his precise script. Meredith Blake, herbalist, loves Caroline, doubts her. Guilt, yet accepts evidence. Laboratory insecure. Figure in meadow suspect or illusion. Conine, vial symbol or proof. He underlined the last question, then reached for a volume of English nursery rhymes. Flipping to this little piggy, the rhyme's simplicity belied its power. 5 suspects, 5 motives, 5 stories, waiting to converge. As he sipped a tisane, Poirot's thoughts turned to the next Piglet, Elsa Greer, who had roast beef, who had loved Amyas with a ferocity that burned. Her account, he suspected, would be as vivid as Meredith's was shadowed, as passionate as his was restrained. But for now, the vial of cognac sat on his desk, catching the lamplight like a tiny, deadly star. It whispered of secrets, of hands, bawd poison, of hearts that broke under the weight of love and betrayal. And Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells humming, listened. Chapter 5. Elsa Greer, who had roast-beefed the London fog, clung to the streets like a jealous lover, its tendrils curling around lamp-posts and blurring the edges of the city's grand facades. Hercule Poirot, impeccable in his tailored overcoat, stepped from a taxi onto the polished steps of a Mayfair townhouse. The brass plaque read Lady Elsa Greer, a name that carried the weight of scandal and glamour in equal measure. 16 years had passed since the murder of Agatha Christie, yet Elsa's name still sparked whispers in drawing-rooms and headlines in the tabloids. Poirot adjusted his hat, his moustache twitching with anticipation. This was no ordinary interview. Elsa, the third little pig in Carla Le Marchant's nursery rhyme riddle, was Amyas's lover, the woman who had stood at the heart of the tragedy. Her story, Poirot knew, would be a performance as much as a confession. The door opened to reveal a butler, his face as unreadable as a marble bust. "Lady Greer is expecting you, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice clipped, betraying no hint. Poem of the household's secret. Poirot, followed him through a foyer adorned with modernist paintings bold, slashes of color that screamed defiance, yet hinted at a curated chaos. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and cigarette smoke, a heady mix that spoke of wealth and restlessness. Elsa Greer awaited in a drawing-room that seemed to belong to a different era. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the space in muted light, illuminating velvet drapes and a chaise longue where she reclined, a cigarette holder poised between her fingers. She was no longer the radiant young muse of Amyas Crale's final canvas, but time had been kind in its cruelty. Her auburn hair, now streaked with silver, was swept into an elegant chignon, and her emerald eyes still burned with a fire that could unsettle the most stoic observer. She wore a silk dress the color of midnight, its cut daring yet refined, as if she were perpetually on the cusp of a grand exit. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low and musical, like a cello played in a minor key. "I wondered when you'd come sniffing around my past. You're late, you know. The vultures have already picked the bones clean." She gestured to a chair, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Poirot sat crossing his legs with deliberate grace. "Madame, the vultures, they are messy eaters. They leave scraps for those with sharper eyes. I am here to see what they missed." Elsa laughed, a sound that danced between amusement and disdain. "Charming. Carla sent you, didn't she? That girl, still chasing ghosts. What do you want from me? A tearful confession? A villain's monologue?" None, Poirot said, raising a hand. "I seek only the truth, madame. Your truth. The truth of that summer at Alderbury, when Amyas Crale painted you, loved you, and died." Her smile faltered, just for a moment, like a candle flickering in a draught. She took a long drag on her cigarette, exhaling a plume of smoke that curled toward the ceiling. "Amyas," she said, as if tasting the name. "He was a storm in human form. Brilliant, reckless, impossible. You've read the case files, I presume. You know what they say about Maître Femme Fatale, who drove Caroline to murder." "I have read," Poirot replied, his eyes fixed on her. "But files, they are like shadows, flat, incomplete. I wish to hear your story from your lips. Tell me of that day, madame, the day Amyas died." Elsa rose, her movements fluid, and crossed to a decanter on a sideboard. She poured 2 glasses of amber liquid brandy by the centand handed, one to Poirot without asking if he wanted it. "You'll need this," she said, returning to her shades. "It's not a short story, and it's not a pretty one." Poirot accepted the glass, but set it untouched on the table beside him. "I am all attention, madame." She leaned back, her gaze drifting to a painting above the fireplace, a vibrant, unfinished portrait of a younger Elsa, her face half-sketched, as if the artist had abandoned it mid-stroke. Amyas's work, unmistakably. "It was June," she began. "Alderbury was alive with color, the roses in the garden, the light on the cliffs, Amyas's canvases everywhere. He was painting me, you know. His masterpiece, he called it. I was his muse, his obsession. But Caroline, she paused, her lips tightening. Caroline was his chain. Poirot tilted his head, noting the venom in her tone. You did not care for Madame Crale, care for her. Elsa's laugh was brittle. She was a shadow over everything. Amyas loved her, in his way, but she suffocated him. She couldn't stand that he saw something in Mia, something alive, something free. She was jealous. Monsieur Poirot, jealousy is a poison all its own. Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice neutral. But let us speak of the day itself. The day of the murder. Tell me what you saw, what you heard. Elsa sipped her brandy, her eyes narrowing as if peering through the fog of memory. It was hot, oppressively so. Amyas was painting in the garden pavilion, a little stone structure by the sea. I was posing for him, wearing a red dress that caught the light like fire. Caroline was lurking, as always, watching us from the terrace. I could feel her eyes, like knives in my back. Around noon, she brought him a beer cold, frosted, straight. From the icebox, she said. Amyas took it, drank deeply, and said, "Everything's fine, my love." Those were his last words to me. Poirot's fingers twitched, as if tracing an invisible thread. His last words, "Madame, you are certain?" She nodded, her expression unreadable. He said them to me, not her. Caroline handed him the bottle, and he drank. Then he started to paint again, but within minutes he was different. His brush faltered, his face grew pale. He clutched his chest, gasped, and fell. I screamed for help, but it was too late. Cognac, they said. Poison in the beer. Caroline's doing. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "And yet, madame, you say these words, 'Everything's fine.' My love was spoken to you, not to his wife who brought the beer." Elsa's hand froze mid-gesture, the cigarette trembling slightly. "Yes, to me." He was looking at me, not her. He always looked at me. "Interesting," Poirot murmured, his voice soft as a cat's tread. "And where were you, madame, when he drank?" "Precisely where." "I was on the model's stool, 5 feet from him," she said quickly. Caroline was closer, hovering by his side. She gave him the bottle, then walked away. She didn't even stay to see him die. Poirot's moustache quivered, a sign of his mind at work. "And the bottle, madame, you saw it clearly. You saw her hand it to him." "Of course I did," Elsa snapped, her composure fraying. It was a green glass bottle, sweating with condensation. She carried it like it was nothing, but I knew she hated me. She wanted him dead because he loved me more. Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, but his eyes told a different story. "You have a remarkable memory, madame. The details, they are vivid, Nans. The red dress, the green bottle, the words of Amyas. And yet 16 years have passed. Memory, it can play tricks, like a magician with a deck of cards." Elsa's gaze hardened. "My memory is perfect. Monsieur Poirot, I loved him. Every moment of that day is burned into me." "Bon," Poirot said, rising. "Then you will have no objection to writing it down for me. A detailed account, every moment. every word. It will help to clarify. She hesitated. Her fingers tighten around the cigarette holder. You think I'm lying? Nan, Poirot said, his smile disarming. I think you are passionate, madame. Passion can cloud, but it can also illuminate. Write it, and we shall see. Elsa stood, her movements sharp, and crossed to a writing desk. Fine, I'll write your little essay. But don't expect me to cry for Caroline. She killed him, and I'll prove it. Poirot bowed, ever the gentleman. I await your words, madame. They will be, I am sure, most revealing. The next morning, Poirot sat in his flat, the scent of his morning tisane chamomile, with a hint of lemon filling the air. A courier had delivered Elsa's written account, a thick envelope, sealed with a wax stamp bearing her initials. He slit it open with a silver letter opener, his movements precise, and began to read. The pages were a torrent of emotion, written in a bold, slanting hand. Elsa described the summer at Alderbury in vivid detail. The scent of roses, the crash of waves, the heat of Amyas's gaze as he painted her. She recounted their love, fierce and consuming, and her hatred for Caroline, whom she called a serpent in silk. The murder scene unfolded as she had described Caroline delivering to Beer Amyas's final words, his collapse. But there were contradictions, small but glaring. She wrote that Amyas drank the beer at noon, yet Philip Blake had placed the time closer to 1. She described the pavilion as shaded, but Meredith Blake had mentioned the sun blazing directly overhead, and those words, "Everything's fine." My love appeared twice, once spoken to her, once to Caroline, as if Elsa couldn't decide which version suited her narrative. Poirot set the pages down. His fingers steepled. "Mon Dieu," he murmured. "The lady, she protests too much, I think. Her passion, it is a mask, but for what? Guilt, grief, or something more?" He rose and paced, his polished shoes clicking on the hardwood floor. Elsa Greer was a woman of contradictions, glamorous yet bitter, confident yet defensive. Her account was a performance, crafted to cast Caroline as the villain, but it cracked under scrutiny. The beer bottle, the timing, the words "something" was amiss, and those last words of a miss, so tender, so final. Were they truly for Elsa, or was she rewriting history to soothe her wounded heart? Poirot paused by the window, gazing at the fog-shrouded street. "The truth, it is like the fog," he said to himself. "It hides, but it cannot vanish. I must see through it, to the heart of this riddle." He turned to his desk, pulling out a notebook where he had begun to map the nursery rhyme. "This little piggy had roast beef," he wrote, underlining Elsa's name. But what is the roast beef, I wonder? Love, vengeance, or a lie served hot and savory? The following day, Poirot took a train to the coast, to the cliffs near Alderbury, where Amyas had died. The pavilion still stood, a weathered stone structure overlooking the sea. He wanted to feel the place, to walk where Elsa had stood, where Amyas had fallen. The air was sharp with salt, the waves a relentless chorus below. He closed his eyes, imagining the scene. Elsa in her red dress, Amyas with his brush, Caroline with the fatal bottle. The contradictions in Elsa's story gnawed at him. Why insist on those last words? Why the discrepancy in time? And why, he wondered, did she describe the bottle as sweating with condensation when the police report noted it was room temperature, not chilled? He sat on a stone bench, sketching the pavilion's layout in his notebook. The model's stool, the easel, path to the terrace, every detail mattered. He recalled Elsa's claim that she was 5 feet from Amyas, too far to tamper with the beer. But the pavilion was small, the distances closer than she implied. A step, a lean, a moment's distraction. Any could have been enough. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of Amanese palette, Poirot felt a spark of intuition. "Pour the roast beef," he murmured. "It is not what she gained, but what she lost. Her love, her future, her Amyas. But did she lose it to Caroline, or to her own hand?" Back in London, Poirot arranged a second meeting with Elsa, this time at a quiet tea-room in Kensington. She arrived late, her fur stole slipping from her shoulders, her eyes wary. "You've read my account," she said, sliding into the booth. "Satisfied?" Poirot sipped his tea, his expression unreadable. "It is a masterpiece, madame, like one of Amyas's paintings. But even masterpieces have flaws. A brushstroke too bold, a color misplaced. Tell me, why do you insist Amyas spoke? Put those words to you." Elsa's fingers tightened around her teacup. "Because he did. He loved me, not her. He was going to leave her, you know. He told me so that morning." Vraiment, Poirot's eyebrows rose. "And yet, in your account, you wrote he spoke to Caroline as well." "Everything's fine, my love. To both of you, perhaps, or to neither." She flushed, a rare crack in her armor. "You're twisting my words. I was there. I saw it all." You saw," Poirot said softly. "But what did you do, madame? The bottle, it was not cold, despite your description. The timing, it shifts in your story. And the pavilion, is small, Nan. Close enough for a hand to slip, to add a drop of poison." Elsa's eyes blazed. "You think I killed him? I loved him. Caroline was the jealous one, the one who couldn't let go." Poirot leaned forward, his voice low. "Love, madame, it is a motive as strong as jealousy, perhaps stronger. If Amyas would not leave Caroline, if he chose her over you, what then?" For a moment Elsa was silent, her face a mask of fury and pain. Then she stood, knocking over her teacup. "You're wrong, Poirot. You'll see. I'll prove it wasn't me." As she stormed out, Poirot watched her go, his mind racing. The contradictions, the passion, the lies, they were pieces of a puzzle, and Elsa Greer was at its center. But was she the villain, or another victim of the tragedy at Alderbury? The chapter closed with Poirot back in his flat, the fog outside thicker than ever. He opened his notebook, adding a note beside Elsa's name. Her truth is a mirror, reflecting what she wishes to see. But mirrors, they can crack. He closed the book, his little grey cells humming with possibility. Elsa's story was a tapestry of love and loss, but its threads were tangled. The truth, he knew, lay in untangling them one contradiction at a time. Chapter 6. Cecilia Williams. Who had none, the late afternoon sun filtered through the lace curtains of Cecilia Williams's modest London flat, casting delicate patterns across a room that seemed frozen in time. Hercule Poirot stepped inside, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the worn Persian rug, his sharp eyes taking in every detail, the mahogany bookshelf sagging under the weight of well-read classics, a single armchair by a cold hearth, and a small table holding a teapot and one chipped cup. The air carried a faint scent of lavender and dust, as if the space itself clung to a past it refused to release. Cecilia, now in her late 50s, stood by the window, her posture as rigid as a metronome, her grey hair pulled into a severe bun, her eyes, pale and piercing, met Poirot's with a mixture of wariness and resignation. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low and precise, "I expected you might come. Carla Le Marchant has stirred the ashes of a fire long extinguished." Poirot inclined his head, his moustache twitching slightly as he offered a courteous smile. "Mademoiselle Williams, the ashes, they may be stirred, but it is the embers beneath that interest me. The truth, it does not burn out so easily." She gestured to the armchair, but Poirot chose to stand, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze steady. "You were the governess at Alderbury. The one who taught young Angela Warren, and who saw, perhaps, more than most on that fatal day 16 years ago." Cecilia's lips tightened, a flicker of something defiance, perhaps, crossing her face. "I saw what there was to see." Caroline Crale was a woman of passion, but not of malice. Yet the evidence was clear. The beer bottle, the poison she handed it to Amyas herself. Poirot nodded, pacing slowly, his steps deliberate. "The evidence, it is like a painting, no? One sees the surface, but the brushstrokes beneath, they tell a different story. Tell me, mademoiselle, what did you see, truly, that day?" Cecilia turned away, her fingers brushing the edge of the curtain as she gazed out at the street below, where children laughed and a horse-drawn cart rattled by. "You ask for memories, monsieur, but memories are not photographs. They blur, they shift. I will tell you what I recall, but I warn you it is not a story of warmth or comfort. The summer of 1929 at Alderbury was vivid in Cecilia's mind, a canvas painted in hues of tension and beauty. The Crale estate sprawled across Devon's rolling hills, its gardens bursting with roses and lavender, the air thick with the hum of bees. Amyas Crale, the painter, was a force of neat, broad-shouldered, with eyes that burned like a storm at sea. His laughter filled the house, but so did his temper, especially when his work was interrupted. Caroline, his wife, moved through the days with a quiet intensity, her auburn hair catching the sunlight, her smile masking a heart bruised by Amyas' open affair with Elsa Greer. Cecilia, as Angela's governess, had been a silent observer. Her role to educate and discipline, not to judge. Angela, then 15, was a whirlwind of rebellion, her face marred by a scar from a childhood accident, her spirit fierce and untamed. She adored Caroline, her older sister, who had raised her like a mother after their parents' death. But that summer the house was a powder keg, and Elsa Greer was the spark. On the morning of the murder, Cecilia had been in the library reviewing Angela's Latin exercises when she heard raised voices from the terrace. Amyas and Caroline were arguing. Their words, sharp and jagged, carried on the breeze. "You can't leave her, Amyas," Caroline had said, her voice breaking. "You promised me. You promised us." Amyas's reply was a low growl, unintelligible, but laced with defiance. Cecilia paused in her recollection, her eyes meeting Poirot's. "I did not eavesdrop, monsieur. It was not my place, but I could not help but hear." Poirot's expression remained neutral, though his mind was racing. "And what did you see, mademoiselle, after this argument?" Cecilia's hands folded in her lap, her knuckles whitening. "I saw Caroline with a bottle of beer. She was walking toward the garden studio where Amyas painted. It was just before noon, the sun high, the air heavy. She carried the bottle as if it were a weapon, her face set, her steps deliberate. I thought nothing of it, then Amyas often drank while he worked, but later, when he collapsed, when they found the conian, she trailed off, her gaze dropping to the floor." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but insistent. "You saw her with the bottle, oui. But did you see her give it to him? Did you see her pour the poison?" Cecilia's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "I saw what I saw." Caroline handed him the bottle. "I was in the garden, near the rose arbor, correcting Angela's work. I looked up, and there she was, giving him the beer. Moments later, he was dead." Poirot tilted his head, his fingers tapping lightly against his chin. "And yet, mademoiselle, you speak of Caroline with a certain respect. You do not call her a murderer. Why is this?" Cecilia hesitated, her composure faltering for the first time. Caroline was not a monster. She loved Amyas, despite his cruelty. She loved Angela even more. I believe she acted out of pain, not hatred. But the evidence. "The evidence," Poirot interrupted, his voice sharp, "is a servant of truth, not its master. Tell me, what else did you see that day? Something small, perhaps, something you dismissed." Cecilia's brow furrowed, and she rose, moving to a small desk where a stack of papers lay neatly arranged. She opened a drawer and withdrew a faded notebook, its pages yellowed. "I kept a journal then," she said, almost to herself. "Not of the murder, but of Angela. Progress. I noted everything, her moods, her lessons, her distractions." She flipped through the pages, stopping at an entry dated the day of Amoris's death. Her finger traced a line, and her voice grew distant. Angela was upset that morning. She'd quarreled with Amyas over breakfast. Something about his painting of Elsa. She stormed off to the garden, her scarf, bright blue, thing trailing behind her. I found it later, near the studio, caught on a thorn bush. I thought it odd, but I didn't mention it to the police. It seemed irrelevant. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his posture stiffening like a cat sensing prey. A scarf, you say, near the studio, and you did not think this significant. Cecilia's lips pressed into a thin line. Angela was a child, monsieur, a troubled one, but not a killer. I assumed she'd dropped it in her haste. The police were focused on Caroline, and I saw no reason to complicate things. Poirot nodded, slowly, his mind weaving a tapestry of possibilities. And yet, mademoiselle, the smallest thread can unravel the grandest fabric. Tell me more of Angela, her relationship with Caroline, her feelings toward Amyas. Cecilia returned to her chair, the notebook still in her hands. Angela was devoted to Caroline. She saw her as a protector, a savior. Amyas, though he was a different matter. Angela resented him, not just for his affair with Elsa, but for how he treated Caroline. He was charming, yes, but cruel in his carelessness. Angela once told me, quoting Shakespeare, "I am a tainted wether of the flock, meetest for death." She felt like an outcast, scarred and unloved, except by Caroline. Poirot's moustache twitched again, a sign of his mind at work. Shakespeare, you say. A curious choice for a girl so young. And what of Elsa Greer? Did Angela speak of her? Cecilia's expression darkened. Angela despised Elsa. She called her a gilded harpy, stealing Amyas's attention. I once overheard Angela muttering that she'd make Elsa pay for breaking Caroline's heart. But it was childish anger, nothing more. Poirot paced again, his steps measured, his voice a low hum. Childish anger, mademoiselle, can be a spark in a dry forest. And what of the others, Philip Blake, Meredith Blake, their roles in this drama? Cecilia's eyes flickered with disdain. Philip was Amyas's shadow, always trailing after him, envious of his talent. He disliked Caroline, thought her too controlling. Meredith was different, softer, lost in his herbs and his unrequited love for Caroline. He was devastated by her conviction, but he never questioned it. He believed the coniine came from his laboratory, stolen by her. Poirot stopped, his gaze locking onto Cecilia's. And you, mademoiselle, what did you believe? For a moment, silence hung heavy in the room, broken only by the distant clatter of a milk cart outside. Cecilia's hands trembled slightly, and she set the notebook down. I believed what the evidence showed. Caroline was guilty, but I also believed she was protecting someone. She never defended herself at the trial, never fought. It was as if she wanted to be punished. Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. Protecting someone, you say? Angela, perhaps. Cecilia's breath caught, and she looked away. I don't know. I've wondered over the years if Angela knew more than she let on. But I couldn't bring myself to ask. She was my student, my responsibility. I failed her, monsieur, as I failed Caroline. Poirot stepped closer, his tone gentle but probing. You did not fail, mademoiselle. You observed, you remembered, and now you have given me a piece of the puzzle, the scarf. the quarrel, the heart of a girl who loved her sister. I ask one thing more. Will you write your account of that day, every detail, no matter how small?" Cecilia nodded, her expression resolute. "I will, for Carla's sake, and for Caroline's." As Poirot left the flat, the London dusk settling over the city, he felt the weight of Cecilia's words. The scarf, a bright blue thread in a tangled web, was no mere coincidence. It placed Angela near the studio, near the moment of death. And Cecilia's detachment, her refusal to speculate beyond the evidence, hinted at a loyalty deeper than she admitted. Was it to Angela, to Caroline, or to her own sense of duty? He paused on the street, pulling his coat tighter against the evening chill. The nursery rhyme echoed in his mind. This little piggy had none. Cecilia, the governess, had no warmth, no family, no stake in the Crales' drum yet. Her sharp eyes had caught a detail others missed. The scarf was a clue, but to what? A prank, a mistake, or something darker? Poirot's little grey cells buzzed with possibility. Angela's anger, Cecilia's observation, Caroline's sacrifice. They were pieces of a puzzle, but the picture was still unclear. He would need the written accounts, the memories of all 5 piglets, to find the truth. For now Cecilia's story was a door cracked open, revealing a glimpse of the storm that had torn Alderbury apart. As he hailed a cab, Poirot murmured to himself, "The scarf, it is a whisper from the past." And whispers, they often lead to screams. The chapter's end left a satisfying chill. Cecilia's scarf discovery planting a seed of doubt about Angela's role, while her stoic demeanor and hidden loyalties deepened the mystery. The listener, Piss, is left eager for the next piece of the puzzle, wondering how this small clue will unravel the truth behind Amyas Crale's death. Chapter 7. Angela Warren, who cried all the way home. The late afternoon sun slanted through the high windows of Angela Warren's Bloomsbury flat, casting long shadows across a room that seemed to hold the weight of centuries. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, sat in a worn leather armchair, his polished shoes catching the light. Across from him, Angela Warren stood by a cluttered desk, her silhouette framed against shelves groaning with archaeological tomes and artifacts, scarabs, pottery shards, and a bronze figurine of an Egyptian cat. Her face, marked by a jagged scar that ran from her left temple to her jaw, was turned slightly away, as if to shield it from scrutiny. Yet her eyes, a fierce hazel, met Poirot's with a clarity that spoke of resilience. "Merci, Mademoiselle Warren, for agreeing to meet with me," Poirot began, his voice smooth but probing. It is not often that the past calls so insistently, demanding to be heard. Angela's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "The past never stops calling, Monsieur Poirot. It's why I dig in the dirt for a living, trying to make sense of what's buried." She moved to a sideboard, pouring tea from a chipped porcelain pot. The scent of bergamot filled the air. "But you're here about Caroline and Amyas, and that wretched day at Alderbury." Poirot inclined his head, his moustache twitching as he observed her precisement. Your sister, Caroline Crale, was convicted of a crime that her daughter, Carla, now believes she did not commit. I seek the truth, mademoiselle, and you were there, a young girl of what was it, 14 years. 15, Angela corrected, handing him a cup. Her fingers, calloused from fieldwork, brushed his briefly. But I wasn't just a girl. I was angry. At Amyas, at the world, at everything. She sat opposite him, crossing her legs in a way that suggested both defiance and fatigue. What do you want to know? Poirot sipped his tea, savoring its warmth. Let us begin with the day Amyas Crale died. You were at Alderbury. Tell me what you saw, what you felt. The smallest detail may hold the key. Angela's gaze drifted to a window where a pigeon fluttered against the sill. It was August, hot as Hades. The estate smelled of roses, and turpentine Amyas was always painting in the garden. I was restless. Caroline was trying to keep things normal, but you could feel the tension. Amyas and Elsa. She broke off, her jaw tightening. They weren't discreet. Elsa was lounging around like she owned the place, and Amyas was painting her, calling her his muse. It made me sick. Poirot's eyes narrowed. You did not approve of Mademoiselle Greer. Angela let out a bitter laugh. Approve, I wanted. To claw her eyes out. She was breaking Caroline's heart, and Amyas didn't care. He'd always been selfish, but that summer she shook her head, her scar catching the light. He was cruel. Poirot set his cup down, his fingers steepled. And your sister, how did she bear this betrayal? Caroline was Caroline. Angela's voice softened, a rare tenderness breaking through. She tried to shield me. Like always, she'd smile, make tea, talk about my schoolwork, as if her world wasn't crumbling. But I saw her cry once, in the kitchen, when she thought no one was looking. It broke me. Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but insistent. And you, mademoiselle, what did you do with this anger, this pain? Angela's hands clenched in her lap. I fought with Amyas, not just that day all summer. I'd yell at him, quote Shakespeare, to make him feel small. Oh, what a noble mind is here overthrown. That sort of thing. He'd laugh, call me a dramatic little beast. But that day she paused, her eyes distant. We had a row in the garden, near his easel. I told him he didn't deserve Caroline. He said I was a spoiled brat who didn't understand love. Poirot's moustache quivered. A heated exchange. Then, and after this quarrel, I stormed off, Angela said, her voice flat. Went to the lake, threw stones into the water until my arm ached. I didn't see him again until he was dead. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And the poison, mademoiselle, the conian that killed him, did you know of it? Angela's head snapped up, her scar stark against her flushed skin. Conian? No. I mean, I knew Meredith dabbled with herbs, but I didn't know what they were. I was a kid, not a chemist. Poirot tilted his head, studying her. Yet you were at Alderbury, where Meredith Blake kept his laboratory. A curious mind, perhaps, might have explored. Angela's eyes flashed. Are you accusing me, monsieur? I didn't touch his poisons. I didn't need to. My words were sharp enough. Poirot raised a placating hand. Nan, Nan, I accuse no one. I merely seek to understand. Tell me, what do you remember of the others that day? Philip Blake, Cecilia Williams, Elsa Greer. Angela leaned back, her expression guarded. Philip was always lurking, pretending to be Amelie's friend, but green with envy. Cecilia was a cold fish, always watching, like she was taking notes. And Elsa, Angela's voice dripped with disdain. She was preening, posing for Amyas's painting. But I saw something odd that day. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Odd. Précis, si vous plot. Angela hesitated, then leaned forward, her voice low. I was by the studio. After my fight with Amyas, I saw Elsa near his easel, fiddling with his paintbrushes. She didn't see me was behind the yew hedge. She looked sneaky, like she was hiding something. Poirot's heart quickened, but his face remained impassive. The paintbrushes, you say? This is most interesting. And what did you do? Nothing, Angela admitted, her shoulders sagging. I was too angry to care. I thought she was just being her usual meddling self. But now, she trailed off, her eyes searching Poirot's. You think it means something, don't you? Poirot smiled faintly. Everything means something, mademoiselle. But let us return to you. Your sister, Caroline, was convicted of this crime. Did you believe her guilty? Angela's face crumpled, a raw pain surfacing. No, never. Caroline couldn't have done it. She loved Amyas, even when he didn't deserve it. But she wouldn't let me visit her in prison. She wrote me letters, saying she was protecting me. I hated her for shutting me out. Her voice cracked. I've spent 16 years hating myself for not saving her. Poirot's voice was soft, almost a whisper. And yet you carry her with you. In your work, your life. Angela touched her scar, a reflexive gesture. This is from when I was a child. Caroline blamed herself. She threw a paperweight in a fit of temper, and it hit me. She never forgave herself. Everything she did after was to protect me. She stopped, her eyes widening as if a realization had struck Poirot. Seized the moment. Even what, mademoiselle? Angela shook her head, tears brimming. I don't know. I feel like she took the blame for something she didn't do. For me. Poirot sat back, his mind racing. Angela's words echoed Carla's letter, Caroline's claim of innocence. The paintbrushes, the scar, the nursery rhyme, this little piggy, cried all the way home, wove together a tapestry of motives and secrets. He needed more. Mademoiselle Warren, he said, his tone firm but kind. I ask one final favor. Would you write an account of that day as you remember it? Every detail, every emotion. It may unlock the truth. Angela wiped her eyes, nodding. I'll do it. For Caroline. For Carla. Poirot rose, bowing slightly. Merci, I shall await your letter with great anticipation. The truth, mademoiselle, is like one of your artifacts. It lies buried, but with care it can be brought to light. As he left the flat, the London dusk settling over the city. Poirot's mind buzzed with possibilities. Angela's revelation about Elsa and the paintbrushes was a spark in the darkness. But her guilt, her love for Caroline, suggested deeper currents. The nursery rhyme hummed in his thoughts. This little piggy cried all the way home. Angela, the wounded sister, had cried indeed, but had she seen more than she knew? The next morning, Poirot sat at his desk in his pristine flat, a cup of tisane steaming beside him. The city's hum filtered through the window, but his focus was on a map of Alderbury he'd sketched, marking the studio, the garden, the yew hedge. Angela's account of Elsa tampering with the paintbrushes gnawed at him. Why the brushes? Connie in paint seemed unlikely. Amyas had died from ingestion, not contact. Yet Angela's memory, vivid and unprompted, held weight. He reached, put his notebook, jotting Elsa Greer, distraction or sabotage. Then, beneath it, Angela Warrengilt, loyalty, scar, protects Caroline. But why? A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. His landlady, Mrs. Hudson, entered with a parcel. "This arrived for you, Mr. Poirot, from Miss Warren." Poirot's eyes lit up. "Excellent. Mercy, Mrs. Hudson." He unwrapped the parcel, revealing a thick envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, Angela's script, bold but uneven, as if written in a rush of emotion. He settled back, adjusting his pince-nez, and began to read Angela Warren's account. "Monsieur Poirot, I've never written about that day. It's been locked in my chest like a shard of pottery too fragile to touch. But for Caroline, I'll try. Forgive me if it's messy. I'm better with trowels than pens. It was August 1925, the summer I turned 15. Alderbury was beautiful but suffocating, like a painting you can't escape. Amyas was in the garden studio, working on that portrait of Elsa. She was sprawled on a chaise, her dress slipping off her shoulder, laughing at his jokes. I hated her, not just for what she was doing to Caroline, but for how she made me feel small, ugly, scarred. Caroline was in the house, baking bread of all things. She said it calmed her. I found her in the kitchen, flour on her cheeks, and she hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. She said, "Don't let them break you, Angie." I didn't know what she meant, but it scared me. That morning, I fought with Amyas. It was near the studio, by the rose trellis. He was mixing paints, humming some ridiculous tune. I told him he was a coward for hurting Caroline. He laughed, said I'd understand when I fell in love. I shouted, "I'd rather die than love someone like you," and threw a stone at his easel. Pit missed, thank God, but he looked at me like I was a stranger. I ran to the lake, crying, throwing rocks until my hands bled. Later, I went back to the house. That's when I saw Elsa. I was behind the yew hedge, hiding. I didn't want anyone to see me crying. She was alone by the easel, picking up Amyas's brushes, turning them in her hands. She looked around like she was afraid of being caught, then put them back, but not quite right. I didn't think much of it then. I was too wrapped up in my own misery. The rest of the day, is a blur. I remember Cecilia Williams scolding me for tracking mud in the house. Philip Blake was on the terrace, smoking, watching Amyas and Elsa like a hawk. Meredith was in his laboratory, muttering about his plants. And Caroline, she was carrying a tray to the studio with a bottle of beer for Amyas. I wanted to stop her, to scream that he didn't deserve her kindness. But I didn't. I wish I had. When they found Amyas, he was slumped in his chair, the beer bottle empty. Caroline was screaming, shaking him. I ran to her, but Cecilia pulled me away. I kept saying, "It's not her fault, it's not her fault," but no one listened. They took her away, and I was left with the echo of her voice, telling me to be strong. I've carried that day like a stone in my heart. I don't know if Elsa's meddling meant anything, or if I'm just grasping at shadows. But I know Caroline didn't kill him. She couldn't have. She was my shield, my everything. If I'd been braver, maybe I could have saved her. Yours, Angela. Warren Poirot set the letter down, his fingers drumming on the desk. Angela's words were raw, vivid, a window into a girl's rage and love. The paintbrushes again Elsa's furtive act, seen only by a hidden witness. But more striking was Angela's devotion to Caroline, her guilt over failing her. She was my shield, she'd written. Poirot closed his eyes, picturing Caroline's sacrifice, her silence in prison. Was it to protect Angela, as Carla's letter suggested? He stood, pacing the room, his mind alight. The nursery rhyme returned, unbidden. This little piggy cried, all the way home. Angela, the crying piglet, had seen something crucial, but her pain had blinded her to its meaning. Elsa's tampering suggested intent, perhaps a plan to discredit Caroline or worse. But how did it connect to the beer bottle? The conian, the cold glass. Poirot stopped, his eyes falling on the map of Alderbury. Bayeux Hedge, the studio, the laboratory. They formed a triangle, a stage for secret. Angela's account placed her at the heart of it, an unwitting observer. He needed to test her story, to probe Elsa's actions further. And he needed to understand Caroline's silence-wise. She'd let the world believe her guilty. Picking up his pen, Poirot wrote, "Next steps consult art expertry, paintbrushes. Re-interview Elsa Greer. Examine laboratory records." Then, beneath it, in bold, Caroline Crale Y. The confession. As he sealed Angela's letter in his desk, Poirot felt the case shifting, like sand beneath his feet. Angela Warren, with her scar and her sorrow, had given him a piece of the puzzle. But the truth, he knew, lay in the spaces between her words, in the silences of those who cried all the way home. The following day, Poirot took a train to Oxford, where Angela was lecturing. At a small archaeological symposium, he found her in a lecture hall, standing before a projector, casting images of a dig in Thebes. Her voice was steady, commanding, as she described a tomb's hidden chamber, its walls etched with stories of loss. The audience, a mix of students and scholars, hung on her words. But Poirot saw the strain in her posture, the way her hand touched her scar when she paused. After the lecture, she spotted him in the back row and approached, her expression wary. "Monsieur Poirot," I didn't expect you here. I am, how you say, a seeker of knowledge, he said, smiling. Your lecture was most illuminating. But I have read your letter, mademoiselle, and I must ask a few more questions. Angela sighed, leading him to a quiet courtyard. The air was crisp, scented with fallen leaves. I've told you everything I remember. What more do you want? Poirot's eyes were kind but unyielding. Clarity, mademoiselle. You saw Elsa with the paintbrushes. Can you recall anything else? The time of day, perhaps, or what she wore? Angela frowned, thinking. It was late morning, I think. The sun was high. Elsa was in a green dress, sleeveless, with a wide-brimmed hat. She kept looking toward the house, like she was nervous. Poirot nodded, filing the detail away. And the brushes, how did she hold them? With care or haste? With purpose, Angela said slowly, like she was checking something. She turned one brush over, then another, then put them back. It was quick, but deliberate. Poirot's heart quickened. Most interesting. And one final thing. You wrote that Caroline was your shield. Did she ever speak of the poison, or of protecting you? Angela's eyes darkened. No. But after Amyas died, before they arrested her, she held me and said, "Whatever happens, Angie, it's not your fault." I thought she meant the fight with Amyas, but now her voice trembled. What if she meant something else? Poirot placed a hand on her arm, his touch light but steady. We shall find out, mademoiselle. You have given me much to ponder. Your courage. It is like your sister's. Angela's lips quivered, but she nodded. Find the truth, monsieur. For her, as Poirot left the courtyard, the autumn wind tugging at his coat, he felt the weight of Angela's trust, her story, her scar, her tears. They were threads in a tapestry he was only beginning to weave. Elsa's paintbrushes loomed large, a clue that could unravel the case or lead him astray. And Caroline's words, "It's not your fault," echoed in his mind. A riddle within a riddle. Back in London, Poirot sat by his fire, a glass of syrup de cassis in hand. He opened his notebook, adding, "Elsa Greer, green dress, nervous glance, deliberate act. Caroline Crale protected Angela, but from what?" The nursery rhyme returned, its rhythm haunting. This little piggy cried all the way home. Angela had cried, yes, but her tears had revealed a truth Poirot could not ignore. The past was calling, and he would answer. Chapter 8. The Puzzle of the Paintbrushes. Hercule Poirot sat in his meticulously arranged London flat, the morning light filtering through heavy damask curtains, casting a golden glow on the polished mahogany table before him. His breakfast tray, a modest affair of café au lait and a single croissant, sat untouched, for his mind was wholly occupied by the Crale case. The revelation from Angela Warren's written account that she had seen Elsa Greer tampering with Amyas Crale's paintbrushes on the day of his murder had ignited a spark in Poirot's little grey cells. The nursery rhyme, "This little piggy," which Carla Le Marchant had tied to the 5 suspects, seemed to hum faintly in the background of his thoughts, its rhythm a curious counterpoint to the puzzle now unfolding. Poirot's fingers tapped lightly. On the arm of his chair, a metronome to his racing thoughts. The paintbrushes. Could Conian, the deadly alkaloid that snuffed out Amyas Crale's life, have been delivered not through the beer bottle, as the original trial concluded, but through the very tools of his art? The idea was audacious, almost theatrical, yet it fit the psychological profile of a killer who wished to strike with precision and symbolism. Amyas, the passionate painter, betrayed by his own craft, who was a notion both poetic and sinister. He rose, adjusting his immaculate silk tie, and crossed to his desk, where a small notebook lay open, its pages filled with neat, precise handwriting. Poirot had always believed that the truth lay not in grand gestures, but in the minutiae, the overlooked details that others dismissed as trivial. Angela's claim about the paintbrushes was such a detail, and it demanded investigation. He picked up the telephone and dialed the number of an old acquaintance, Dr. Marcel Fournier, a retired chemist and amateur art enthusiast, who had once assisted Poirot in a case involving poisoned ink. "Bonjour, Marcel," Poirot said when the line connected, his voice crisp yet warm. "It is Hercule Poirot. I require your expertise in a matter most curious. Tell me, is it possible to mix a poison such as coniine into oil paint without altering its appearance or consistency?" Fournier's voice, gravelly with age, but sharp with curiosity, crackled through the receiver. "Coniine, you say? A nasty alkaloid, odorless in small doses, but potent, mixing it with oil paint. Possible, yes, but tricky. The paint's viscosity would mask the poison's presence, and an artist, absorbed in his work, might not notice a slight change in texture. But application would be that challenge coniine is absorbed through the skin or inhalation. A painter, constantly handling brushes, cleaning them with turpentine, or even breathing in fumes. Yes, it could work, but it would require careful calculation to ensure a lethal dose. Poirot's eyes gleamed, and the brush itself, could it carry to poison directly to the victim? "Indeed," Fournier replied. "If the bristles were soaked in a solution of coniine and allowed to dry, the poison could remain dormant until reactivated by the paint or turpentine. A clever method, Poirot, but risky. The killer would need intimate knowledge of the artist's habits." "Mercy," Marcel Poirot said, his mind already racing ahead. "You have given me much to ponder." He hung up and paced the room, his polished shoes clicking softly on the parquet floor. The paintbrush theory opened a new avenue in the case, one that challenged the prosecution's narrative of Caroline Crale poisoning Amyas' beer. If Elsa had tampered with the brushes, as Angela claimed, it suggested a calculated act, one born of passion or desperation. But why the brushes? Why not the beer, a simpler method? The answer, Poirot suspected, lay in the psychology of the killer mind that sought not just death but a statement. He retrieved Angela's written account from the stack of suspect testimonies, rereading her words with care. "I saw Elsa near Amyas' easel, fiddling with his brushes. She thought no one was watching, but I was behind the hedge, sketching. She dipped one brush in a small vial, then wiped it clean, or so she thought. The detail was vivid, almost too vivid, as if Angela had been waiting 16 years to unburden herself. Yet Poirot knew memory was a fickle thing, shaped by time and emotion. Was Angela's recollection accurate, or was it colored by her loyalty to her sister, Caroline, who had died in prison for the crime? To test this, Poirot decided to visit an art supply shop in Soho, one frequented by Amyas Crale in his lifetime. The shop, Atelier du Pinceau, was a cramped, dusty haven of pigments, canvases, and brushes, its air thick with the scent of linseed oil. The proprietor, a wiry man named Mr. Gideon Voss, greeted Poirot with a raised eyebrow, clearly unaccustomed. Two suited gentlemen in his bohemian domain, Monsieur Voss. Poirot began, bowing slightly. I am investigating a matter from years past, concerning the late Amyas Crale. You knew him, n'est-ce pas? Voss's face softened, though his eyes remained wary. I knew Amyas' brilliant painter, terrible with money, always in here, buying the best sable brushes, then complaining about the cost. What's this about? Poirot leaned forward, his voice low. I wish to know about his tools, his brushes, specifically. Did he have a particular preference? Bow. And could one, perhaps, tamper with such brushes without detection? Voss scratched his chin, his fingers stained with ochre. Amyas was particular about his brushes, used Kalinsky sable, finest quality, for his oils. He'd clean them obsessively, soap, the works, tampering. Possible, I suppose. If someone mixed a substance into the bristles, it could stick, especially if it dried. But Amyas would have noticed anything odd when he painted. He had an eye for detail, and if the substance was odorless, colorless, Poirot pressed. Voss shrugged. Might slip by, especially if he was distracted. Amyas was always half in his own world when he worked. Poirot thanked Voss and purchased a single Kalinsky sable brush, slipping it into his coat pocket as a tangible reminder of the task at hand. Back at his flat, he examined the brush under a magnifying glass, noting the fine, tapered bristles. He imagined Elsa Greer, her elegant fingers dipping the brush into a vial of cognac, her face a mask of determination. But why the risk? Why not poison the beer, as the prosecution had claimed? The answer, he suspected, lay in the axe into Miss Elsa, the lover, destroying Amyas through the very art that bound them. The next step was to re-examine the suspects' accounts for discrepancies in their timelines, particularly around the moment Amyas was poisoned. Poirot spread the 5 written testimonies across his table, each a window into a different mind. Philip Blake's account was curt, almost dismissive, placing him in the garden with Meredith during Amyas's final hour. Meredith's was verbose, filled with botanical tangents, but vague on his own movements. Elsa's was passionate, her prose dripping with emotion, yet her timeline of the morning was suspiciously precise. Cecilia Williams, the governess, offered a clinical recounting, noting Caroline's delivery of the beer, but omitting her own whereabouts. Angela's account, meanwhile, was the most vivid, her mention of the paintbrushes, a lightning bolt in The narrative. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he compared their descriptions of the fatal morning. The murder had occurred around noon, when Amyas was painting in the garden studio at Alderbury. The beer bottle, laced with cognac, was delivered by Caroline at 11:45 a.m. According to Cecilia, Amyas drank it shortly after and collapsed by Lastosi 15 pagina m. Yet Angela's account placed Elsa at the easel at 11:30 a.m., tampering with the brushes. If Elsa had poisoned the brushes, how did the cognac end up in the beer? Or was there a second method, a dual attempt to ensure Amyas's death? To clarify, Poirot visited the British Museum's Art Conservation Department, where a young curator, Miss Evelyn Harper, agreed to meet him. Her office was a labyrinth of canvases and chemical bottles, a fitting stage for Poirot's inquiry. Mademoiselle Harper, Poirot began, producing the Kalinsky sable brush. I am investigating a case involving oil, paint, and poison. Could a substance like cognac be mixed into paint and absorbed through the skin during painting? Harper adjusted her glasses, intrigued. Cognac is a liquid alkaloid. Yes, it could theoretically be mixed with linseed oil or turpentine, the solvents in oil paint. The skin absorption would be slow, but if the artist worked for hours, handling wet brushes or inhaling fumes, it could accumulate. The bigger risk would be indigestion. If the artist licked the brush to shape the bristles, as some do. Poirot's moustache twitched. Licked the brush. "Oh, yes," Harper said. "Old habit among painters, though less common now. Amyas Crale, for instance, he was known for it. I studied his work at university. His brushwork was so precise, he'd wet the bristles with his tongue for fine details." This was a revelation. If Amyas had licked a poisoned brush, the cognac could have entered his system directly, bypassing the beer entirely. But the autopsy had confirmed cognac in the beer glass, suggesting both methods might have been employed. Double poisoning. The idea was bold, almost reckless, yet it fit the theatricality of the crime. Back at his flat, Poirot sketched a timeline on his notepad, a web of intersecting moments. 11:30 a.m. Elsa tampers with brushes per Angela. 11:45 a.m. Caroline delivers beer per Cecilia. 12 p.m. Amyas drinks beer and paints per all accounts. 12:15 p.m. Amyas collapses, dead from cognac poisoning. The timelines overlapped, but gaps remained. Where was Elsa after tampering with the brushes? Why did Cecilia omit her own movements? And why had no one mentioned Amyas licking his brushes, a habit Harper claimed was well known? Poirot's pencil paused over the page, circling Elsa's name, her passion for Amyas. Her rage at his refusal to leave Caroline made her the prime candidate for such a calculated act. Yet Angela's loyalty to Caroline raised the possibility of fabrication, perhaps to shift blame from her sister. To test this, Poirot invited Carla Lamarchant to his flat, hoping her perspective might illuminate Angela's motives. Carla arrived promptly, her auburn hair tied back, her eyes bright with hope but shadowed by doubt. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, settling into a chair. "Have you found anything new?" "I can't stop thinking about Mother's letter, her certainty of innocence." Poirot nodded, his expression grave. "Mademoiselle, I am exploring a new theory, one suggested by your Aunt Angela. She claims to have seen Elsa Greer tampering with Amyas's paintbrushes. Does this surprise you?" Carla frowned, her fingers twisting a handkerchief. "Angela never mentioned that to me, but she was only 14 then, so emotionally. She adored Mother, blamed herself for not stopping the trial. I wouldn't be surprised if she saw something and kept it secret to protect Mother's memory." "And Elsa?" Poirot asked. "What do you know of her relationship with your father?" Carla's lips tightened. Elsa was obsessed with him. Father was painting her portrait that summer, and she thought it meant he'd leave Mother. But Father never would have loved Mother, even if he was reckless. Elsa didn't understand that. Poirot leaned forward. "And your Aunt Angela, did she ever speak of the paintbrushes, or of Elsa's behavior that day?" Carla hesitated. "Not directly. But she once said Elsa was sneaky, always hovering around Father's studio. Angela was jealous of Elsa. I think she was so young, and Father doted on her in his way." This confirmed Poirot's suspicion. Angela's account might be tinged with bias, yet its specificity suggested truth. He thanked Carla and turned his attention to the physical evidence. The beer bottle, the glass, the brushes each held a piece of the puzzle. He telephoned Scotland Yard, requesting access to the case's archived evidence, but was told the brushes had been discarded, deemed irrelevant at the time. The beer bottle and glass, however, remained. The next morning, Poirot visited the police archives, a cavernous basement filled with dusty boxes. A clerk, a dour man named Jenkins, led him to a crate labeled Crale, 1929. Inside were the beer bottle and glass, both cleaned but preserved. Poirot examined them under a magnifying lamp, noting faint scratches on the bottle's neck as if it had been opened and resealed. A detail nagged at him, a retired officer's comment mentioned in passing that the bottle was cold, as if from an icebox. Yet no icebox was near the garden studio. Jenkins, Poirot said, "Is there a record, pour of the bottle's temperature at the scene?" Jenkins rummaged through a file, producing a yellowed report. Here Inspector Hale noted the bottle was unusually cold, like it came from a fridge. Odd, since the Crales didn't have one in the garden. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The cold bottle suggested premeditation. Someone had prepared it in advance, perhaps in the house, then brought it to the studio. But who? Caroline, delivering the beer, was the obvious suspect. Yet her confession had always struck Poirot as too convenient, a martyr's act. Elsa, with her access to the studio, could have tampered with both the brushes and the bottle, ensuring Amélis's death. As Poirot left the archives, a new hypothesis formed. What if the beer and the brushes were poisoned by different hands? Caroline, protecting Angela, might have confessed to a crime she believed her sister committed, unaware of Elsa's actions. The idea was complex, but Poirot thrived on complexity. He returned to his flat and began cross-referencing the suspects' accounts again. searching for the moment when the bottle and brushes intersected. Philip Blake's testimony placed him near the house at 11:30 a.m., fetching a drink. Meredith, in his laboratory, claimed to have seen Caroline enter the studio with the beer. Cecilia, watching from a window, noted the scarf near the easel, detail Angela later echoed. Elsa's account, however, was silent on the brushes, focusing instead on her final conversation with Amyas, his assurance that everything's fine, my love. The phrase, Poirot realized, might not have been directed at Elsa, but at Caroline. Overheard and Missa, TTRIBUTED. He sketched a new timeline, incorporating the cold bottle. 11 a.m. Caroline is in the house, preparing lunch per Philip. Las 11:15 de la mañana Elsa is at these, tampering with brushes, per Angela. Las 11:30 de la mañana Meredith sees Caroline leave the house with beer, per Meredith. 11:45 a.m. Caroline delivers beer to Amyas, per Cecilia. 12 p.m. Amyas paints, possibly licking brushes, and drinks beer. 12:15 p.m. Amyas collapses. The cold bottle suggested it was prepared earlier, perhaps by Elsa, who then tampered with the brushes as a backup. But Angela's involvement couldn't be dismissed. Her access to Meredith's laboratory, her anger at Amyas, made her a plausible suspect for the brush tampering. With Caroline taking the fall, Poirot closed his notebook, the timeline a lattice, of possibilities. The truth, he knew, lay in the gaps, those unspoken moments where motives and actions collided. He resolved to confront Elsa again, to probe her reaction to the paintbrush theory. If she flinched, if her carefully constructed facade cracked, he would know. And if Angela's story held, the nursery rhyme's final piglet might yet reveal its secrets. The chapter closed with Poirot standing at his window, gazing at the London skyline, his mind a whirl of brushes, bottles, and betrayals. The truth was close, tantalizingly so, and he would not rest until it emerged, clear as the morning light. Chapter 9. The Beer Bottles Secret. The London air hung heavy with the scent of rain as Hercule Poirot stepped out of the black cab, his polished shoes clicking against the wet cobblestones. The police archives, a squat, unassuming building, tucked behind a row of Georgian townhouses, loomed ahead, its grey facade blending into the drizzle. Poirot adjusted his Homburg hat, his gloved fingers brushing a stray droplet from his moustache. The case of Amyas Crale's murder, 16 years dormant, had begun to pulse with new life, and today he sought the silent witnesses of that fatal day, the physical evidence. Inside, the archives smelled of old paper and dust, a labyrinth of shelves stretching into dimly lit corners. A clerk, a wiry man with spectacles perched precariously on his nose, led Poirot to a basement room where evidence boxes were stacked like forgotten relics. "Crale case, you said," the clerk muttered, rifling through a ledger. "Not much call for that one. Been years." "Oui, Monsieur Poirot," replied, his voice smooth as velvet. "But the past, it has a way of whispering its secrets, too. Those who listen The clerk raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Retrieving a battered cardboard box labeled Crale, 1939, he set it on a scarred wooden table, its surface etched with years of careless handling. Poirot dismissed the clerk with a courteous nod, eager to be alone with the artifacts of tragedy. He opened the box, revealing a collection of items sealed in plastic: a glass tumbler with faint smudges, a small brown bottle with a faded label, a photograph of the crime scene showing Amyas Crale slumped in his garden chair, and a few typed reports yellowed by time. Poirot's eyes lingered on the beer bottle that had delivered death. Its label, though peeling, bore the name Devonshire Ale, a local brew Amyas had favored. The accompanying report confirmed it had contained coniine, the poison extracted from hemlock, stolen from Meredith Blake's laboratory. Caroline Crale, the report claimed, had handed Amyas the bottle, her fingerprints alone marking its surface. The narrative was tidy, too tidy, Poirot thought, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. Truth, he knew, was rarely so neat. He lifted the bottle's evidence bag, turning it in the dim light. Something nagged at him, a detail from the trial, transcript he'd read the previous night. The bottle had been cold when Amyas drank from it, as if freshly chilled. Yet the Crale estate, Alderbury, was a sprawling country manor with no icebox in the garden where Amyas painted. The kitchen, half a mile from the crime scene, was the nearest source of refrigeration. How, then, had the bottle been so cold? Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign his little grey cells were stirring. He set the bottle down and turned to the reports, flipping through pages of forensic notes. Most were mundane measurements of the bottle, the volume of liquid remaining, the chemical analysis of coniine. But one detail, buried in a handwritten addendum by a retired constable named Harold Grayson, caught his eye. Grayson, who had been first on the scene, noted, "Bottle was ice-cold to the touch, like it came straight from an icebox. No icebox found in garden or studio." Odd that Poirot leaned back, his eyes narrowing. Odd indeed, he murmured. The constable's observation had been overlooked, dismissed as trivial in the rush to convict Caroline. But to Poirot, it was a thread in the tapestry of the case, one that could unravel the accepted story. If the bottle was cold, someone had brought it from the kitchen or elsewhere and placed it in Amyas's hand. Caroline, the devoted wife, had been seen delivering the bottle. But had she been the one to chill it? Or had another hand, unseen, prepared the fatal drink? He closed the box and left the archives, his mind racing. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glossy under the weak autumn sun. Poirot hailed another cab, directing the driver to a modest, terraced house in Clapham, home to Harold Grayson, the retired constable. If anyone could shed light on the bottle's chill, it was he. Grayson's home was a study in orderly simplicity, a small garden with neatly trimmed roses, a parlor with faded wallpaper, and a tea tray set out as if expecting company. Grayson himself, a stout man in his late 60s with a shock of white hair, greeted Poirot with a mix of curiosity and wariness. "Hercule Poirot," he said, pouring tea. Heard of you. What's this about the Crale case? That's long. Buried, not buried, Monsieur Poirot. Corrected, accepting a cup. Merely sleeping. I seek the truth about a bottle of beer that was, as you noted, curiously cold. Grayson's eyes widened, then softened with recognition. You read my note, then. Nobody paid it much mind at the time. Said I was fussing over nothing. Poirot does not believe in nothing, he replied, his tone gentle but firm. Every detail, it speaks. Tell me, what did you see that day? Grayson leaned back, his gaze distant. It was a hot day, August 1939. I was called to Alderbury after the doctor confirmed poisoning. Amyas Crale was dead in his garden chair, paintbrush still in his hand. The bottle was on the table beside him, half empty, with a glass nearby. I picked it up to secure its standard procedure, and it was cold, like it had been in an icebox. I mentioned it to the inspector, but he said it didn't matter. Caroline Crale's prints were on it, and she'd confessed. Case closed. Poirot sipped his tea, his mind cataloguing Grayson's words. And the garden there was no icebox, no cooler. None, Grayson said. The kitchen was a good walk away, up at the house. I checked myself. No icebox, no bucket of ice, nothing. I thought maybe someone brought the bottle from the kitchen, but the staff said Caroline fetched it herself. Still, it puzzled me. A bottle doesn't stay cold that long in the sun. Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. And the glass, did you examine it? Aye, Grayson said. It had Amyas's prints and a smudge of lipstick. Everyone assumed it was Caroline's, though the report didn't test the shade. Sloppy work, if you ask me. Sloppy, oui, Poirot agreed, his voice tinged with disapproval. The assumptions, they are the enemies of truth. Tell me, Monsieur Grayson, did you notice anything else, anything overlooked? Grayson frowned, rubbing his chin. There was one thing. The table where the bottle sat it had a ring of condensation, like you'd get from a cold drink, but the glass didn't have one. I thought it odd, but nobody followed up. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A ring of condensation, he repeated softly. Most interesting. You have been most helpful, monsieur. As Poirot left Grayson's home, the puzzle pieces shifted in his mind. The cold bottle, the condensation ring, the untested lipstick, they were not mere details but signposts to a hidden truth. Caroline's confession, so quick and absolute, had sealed her fate. But what if it was a shield? What if she had taken the blame to protect someone else, someone who had handled the bottle before her? Back at his flat, Poirot spread his notes across his desk, the case file open beside them. The nursery rhyme, "This little piggy," floated through. Peer his thoughts. Each suspect a piglet with a motive. Philip Blake's resentment, Meredith's guilt, Elsa's passion, Cecilia's loyalty. Angela's angerage could have touched the bottle, but the coldness, the condensation, pointed to premeditation. Someone had prepared the poison, chilled the bottle, and ensured it reached Amyas's lips. He picked up Cecilia Williams's written account, rereading her precise description of seeing Caroline with the bottle moments before Amyas drank. Cecilia had noted the bottle's sheen, as if it glistened with dew. Poirot paused. Dew or condensation? Cecilia's sharp eyes had caught a detail others missed, but her loyalty to Angela, Caroline's sister, clouded her narrative. Could Cecilia have known more than she wrote? Next, he turned to Angela's account. Her teenage rage at Amyas was palpable. Her claim of seeing Elsa with the paintbrushes a bombshell. But Angela had been near the laboratory where the conian was stolen. Had she, in a fit of youthful rebellion, tampered with the bottle only for Caroline to cover for her? Or was Elsa, the scorned lover, the true culprit, her passionate account a performance to hide her guilt? Poirot closed his eyes, letting the facts swirl like leaves in a storm. The bottle's coldness suggested it had been prepared in advance, perhaps in the kitchen, then carried to the garden. But Caroline, by all accounts, had fetched it herself. Had someone handed it to her, already laced with poison? Or had the bottle been swapped, a cold one replacing a warm one in a sleight of hand? He opened his eyes and reached for the telephone, dialing the number of a forensic chemist he'd consulted years ago, Dr. Evelyn Harper. Her voice, crisp and no-nonsense, answered after 2 rings. Poirot, this is a surprise. What's the case? A matter of poison, ma chère docteur, Poirot said. Conian, to be precise. Tell me, could it be dissolved in beer without altering its taste or appearance? Harper considered this. Conian has a bitter taste, but in small doses. It could be masked by a strong flavor like beer, especially a hoppy ale. It's colorless, so no visual clue. The trick is the delivery. Conian acts fast, within minutes. If the bottle was cold, it might slow the victim's suspicion, make it seem refreshing. And the bottle itself, Poirot pressed. If it were chilled, how long would it remain cold in a warm garden? Not long, Harper said. 10, maybe 15 minutes in August heat. The condensation would evaporate quickly unless it was shaded. Poirot thanked her and hung up, his mind racing. The bottle had been cold when Grayson touched it, minutes after Amyas's death. The timeline was too tight for Caroline. To fetch a bottle from the kitchen, chill it, poison it, and deliver it without notice. Someone else had prepared it, someone with access to the kitchen or another cooling source. He stood, pacing his small parlor. The nursery rhyme returned, its rhythm mocking him. This little piggy went to market. This little piggy stayed home. The answer lay in the piglets, their motives intertwined like threads in a Gordian knot. Caroline's confession, he now believed, was a sacrifice. She had seen the bottle, perhaps suspected its danger, and handed it to Amyas to protect someone, Angela, most likely, whose youthful impulsiveness could have led to a deadly prank. But another possibility gnawed at him, Elsa Greer. Her account of Amyas's final words, "Everything's fine, my love," rang false, too theatrical. Had she been there, watching him drink, ensuring the poison took hold? The lipstick on the glass, assumed to be Caroline's, could belong to Elsa, her presence at the scene, UNNOTED. Poirot sat at his desk and began sketching a timeline, his pen moving with precision. At 10 a.m., Amyas was painting in the garden. At 10:30, Caroline was seen fetching the bottle. By 11, Amyas was dead. The bottle, cold and condensation-ringed, had been placed on the table between 10:30 and 11. The window was narrow, the actors few. He drew a line from Caroline to Angela, then to Elsa, the groundskeeper. The hidden piglet he'd yet to meet might hold another piece of the puzzle. But for now, the bottle's secrety anomaly of its chill pointed to a truth Caroline had died to conceal. She had confessed. Poirot realized, not out of guilt, but out of love. A mother's or sister's love to shield another from blame. The chapter closed with Poirot folding his timeline, slipping it into his pocket. The rain had returned, tapping against his window like an impatient accomplice. He smiled faintly, his eyes alight with purpose. The truth, like the bottle, was cold and clear, waiting to be grasped. Tomorrow he would seek the groundskeeper, the forgotten witness, and unravel the final threads of this retrospective riddle. Chapter 10. Letters from the Piglets. The London fog clung to the windows of Hercule Poirot's flat, like a conspirator reluctant to depart. Inside, the air was warm, scented with the faint tang of Earl Grey and the crisp rustle of paper. Poirot sat at his mahogany desk, his small hands arranging 5 envelopes with the precision of a chess master plotting an opening gambit. Each envelope bore the name of one of the 5 little piglets: Philip Blake, Meredith Blake, Elsa Greer, Cecilia Williams, and Angela Warren. These were no ordinary letters. They were the written accounts Poirot had requested, each a window, be into the fatal day at Alderbury 16 years ago, when Agatha Crale was poisoned. The detective's mustache twitched as he surveyed the envelopes, his little grey cells humming with anticipation. The nursery rhyme this little piggy echoed in his mind, not as a childish chant, but as a psychological cipher, each piglet tethered to a motive, a memory, a lie. Poirot's valet, George, entered silently, bearing a silver tray with a fresh pot of tea. "Will you be requiring anything else, sir?" he asked, his voice as unobtrusive as his movements. "None, George," Merci Poirot replied, his eyes never leaving the envelopes. Only the quiet, and perhaps a touch of inspiration from the muses of truth. George inclined his head and withdrew, leaving Poirot alone with his quarry. The detective selected the first envelope, marked Philip Blake in a bold, angular script. He slit it open with a silver letter knife, the sound sharp in the stillness, and unfolded the pages within. Philip Blake's account. "My dear M. Poirot, write this at your insistence, though I confess I find it a tiresome exercise. The past is a closed book, and I've no desire to reopen its pages. But you've a reputation for persistence. So here is my recollection of that wretched day at Alderbury. Amyas Crale was my oldest friend, a man of immense talent and equally immense flaws. His passion for his art and for women was his engine. Bend his ruin. That summer he was besotted with Elsa Greer, a girl half his age, all fire and ambition. Caroline, his wife, was a storm of jealousy. her eyes darting like daggers whenever Elsa was near. I saw it all from the sidelines. I guessed at their estate, trying to keep the peace while Amyas painted his masterpiece with Elsa as his muse. The morning of his death, I was in the garden, smoking a cigar and reading the Financial Times. The air was thick with the scent of roses and tension. I heard Amyas and Caroline arguing in the studio, her voice shrill, his defiant. She accused him of betrayal. He laughed it off, saying Elsa was just a phase. I stayed clear, not wanting to be dragged into their domestic squall. Around noon, I saw Caroline storm out, her face pale as ash. She carried a bottle of beer, saying she was taking it to Amyas. I thought nothing of Amyas often drank while he worked. An hour later, he was dead, poisoned by cayenne in that very bottle. Caroline's guilt was plain as day. She'd threatened him. She'd delivered the poison, and she confessed at the trial. What more is there to say? I was in the library when they found him, catching up on correspondence. Meredith was there too, muttering about his herbs. Elsa screamed when she saw Amyas's body, a performance I found theatrical even then. Cecilia, the governess, was fussing over Angela, Caroline's brat of a sister. That's all I recall, and it's more than I care to. Yours, Philip Blake Poirot, set the letter down, his brow furrowed. Philip's account was laced with disdain, not just for Caroline, but for the entire affair. His description of the garden scene was vivid, yet curiously detached, as if he'd been a spectator at a play rather than a witness to tragedy. Poirot noted the mention of Meredith in the library, a detail absent from Philip's earlier interview. Was it a slip or a deliberate crumb? And the cigar why specified. Poirot's fingers tapped the desk, a rhythm as steady as a metronome. He reached for the next envelope, marked Meredith Blake in a hesitant, spidery hand. Meredith Blake's encounter, M. Poirot. Your request has stirred memories I'd rather leave buried. Alderbury was my home, my sanctuary, until that day turned bit into a nightmare. I write this in the hope that truth, however painful, may bring some peace. I was in my laboratory that morning, cataloguing my herbs. Conian, the poison that killed Amyas, was among them, rare specimen I distilled for study, not malice. I kept my door locked, but Caroline had a key, a privilege I'd granted out of trust. I've blamed myself ever since for not safeguarding it better. Amyas was painting in the garden studio, Elsa posing for him in a blaze of sunlight. I saw them from my window, their laughter drifting like music. Caroline was elsewhere, perhaps with Angela. Around 11, I heard raised voices, Amyas and Caroline, arguing again. I stayed clear, not wanting to intrude. Later, I saw Caroline cross the lawn with a bottle of beer, her expression grim. I assumed it was for Amyas, a peace offering, perhaps. When I joined Philip in the library after lunch, we spoke little. He was absorbed in his letters, I in my guilt. Then came Elsa's scream, and we ran to the studio. Amyas was slumped in his chair, his face twisted in agony. Caroline stood nearby, silent, her eyes empty. I knew then that my conian had been used, and I suspected her at once. But I said nothing, fearing my own negligence would be exposed. My heart has carried this weight for 16 years. If Caroline was innocent, as Carla claims, then my silence was a betrayal. I pray your investigation finds the truth. Sincerely, Meredith Blake Poirot leaned back, his eyes narrowing. Meredith's letter was a tapestry of regret, woven with threads of reproach. The detail about Caroline's key to the laboratory was new, a fact he'd omitted in their interview. Why? And the timing Caroline crossing the lawn after the argument contradicted Philip's account of her storming out during it. Poirot's fingers traced the edge of the envelope, his mind sifting through the discrepancies. He opened the third letter, Elsa Greer, her name scrawled in a flamboyant cursive. Elsa Greer's, Agatha Poirot. You ask me to relive the day my world shattered. Very well, but don't expect me to be gentle. Amyas was my everything, my lover, my future, my art. Caroline stole him from me, not with love, but with poison. I'll never forgive her. That morning, I was posing for Amyas in the studio, his brush capturing my soul on canvas. He was alive, electric, his eyes locked on mine. Caroline was a shadow, flitting about the house, her jealousy a palpable thing. I heard her scream at Amyas, accusing him of abandoning her. He brushed it off, whispering to me that she'd never understand us. Just before noon, Caroline brought him a bottle of beer. I saw her hand it to him, her smile tight as a noose. Amyas drank deeply, laughing, saying, "Everything's fine, my love." Those were his last words to me. Minutes later, he clutched his chest, gasping, and collapsed. I screamed, ran to him, but he was gone. Caroline stood there, cold as stone, watching him die. I was in the studio the whole time, never left his side. Philip was skulking in the garden, Meredith in his lab, Cecilia with Angela somewhere. I don't know who took the poison, but Caroline had motive and means. She hated me, hated us. Isn't that enough? Elsa Greer Poirot's lips pursed. Elsa's passion burned through the page, her love for Amyas as vivid as her hatred for Caroline. Yet her account was riddled with contradictions. She claimed to have been in the studio the whole time, yet in her interview she'd mentioned stepping out briefly to fetch a shawl. And Amyas's last words, "Everything's fine," my love felt rehearsed, a detail too perfect to be spontaneous. Poirot set the letter aside, his gaze shifting to the fourth envelope. Cecilia Williams, written in a precise schoolmistress's hand. Cecilia Williams's account, dear M. Poirot. I comply with your request out of duty, though I doubt my words will alter the past. Caroline Crale was a devoted mother and sister, but her marriage to Amyas was a crucible of pain. I was their governess, tasked with Angela's education, and I saw more than most that morning. I was in the schoolroom with Angela, reviewing her Latin from the window. I saw Amyas and Elsa in the studio, their intimacy blatant. Caroline was in the house, preparing lunch with the cook. Around 11, I heard her argue with Amyas in the garden, her voice sharp, his mocking. Angela ran out to join them, and I followed to keep her in check. Later, I saw Caroline carry a bottle of beer to the studio. She looked weary, not vengeful. I was back in the schoolroom when Elsa's scream pierced the air. I rushed to the studio, finding Amyas dead, Caroline standing motionless. Elsa was hysterical. Philip and Meredith arriving moments later. Angela was near the greenhouse, her scarf caught on a rosebush, detail I noted but didn't report, as it seemed trivial. Caroline's confession spared Angela further scrutiny. Believed her guilty, but her love for Angela was absolute. If there's doubt, I trust you to find it. Yours, Cecilia Williams. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Cecilia's account was a model of clarity, yet its restraint hinted at unspoken loyalties. The scarf, mentioned again, was no longer trivial. It placed Angela near the crime scene, a fact Cecilia had withheld at the trial, and her description of Caroline's demeanor, weary, not vengeful, clashed with Elsa's portrait of a cold killer. Poirot reached for the final envelope. Angela Warren, her handwriting bold yet uneven, as if written in haste. Angela Warren's, "Account him, Poirot. You've dragged me back to a day I've spent 16 years trying to forget. Alderbury was my home, Caroline my anchor, Amyas my tormentor. I was a teenager then, angry at the world, especially him. But I didn't kill him, and neither did Caroline. That morning I was in the greenhouse, sketching fossils. I heard Amyas and Caroline arguing her, pleading, him dismissing her. I wanted to confront him, but Cecilia kept me in the schoolroom. Around noon, I slipped out to the garden near the studio. I saw Elsa fussing with Amyas's paintbrushes, her hands quick and secretive. Caroline brought him a beer, and I saw her smiles sad, not cruel. When Amyas died, I was back in the greenhouse. Elsa's scream brought me running. Caroline was there, frozen, as if she'd seen a ghost. I lost my scarf, somewhere maybe near the roses. I never told the police about Elsa and the paintbrushes. I was too scared, and Caroline's confession silenced me. She protected me always, even when I didn't deserve it. If you can prove her innocence, I'll owe you more than words can say. Angela Warren Poirot exhaled, his mind a kaleidoscope of details. Angela's letter was a bombshell, her claim about Elsa's paintbrushes, echoing the art expert's theory that conian could be mixed into paint. Yet her admission of being near the studio, scarf lost, placed her dangerously close to the crime. The letters, collectively, were a chorus of conflicting voices, each suspect pointing fingers while shielding their own secrets. He rose, pacing the room, his steps measured but urgent. The nursery rhyme surfaced again in his thoughts. This little piggy went to market. This little piggy stayed home. Philip, the market-goer, detached yet resentful. Meredith, the homebody, crippled by guilt. Elsa, feasting on love and rage. Cecilia, austere yet loyal. Angela, weeping for her sister's sacrifice. But the rhyme was more than a map. Was a map. Each piggy represented not just a suspect, but a psychological archetype, their motives rooted in envy, love, duty, or shame. Poirot paused by the window, the fog outside mirroring the murk of the case. A new question emerged. Why had Caroline confessed? The letters painted her as selfless, her love for Angela a constant refrain. Had she taken the blame to protect her sister, believing Angela had stolen the quinine? Or was there another truth, hidden in the gaps between these accounts? He returned to his desk, spreading the letters before him like a mosaic. His eyes darted from one to another, cross-referencing details. Philip's cigar in the garden, Meredith's key, Elsa's paintbrushes, Cecilia's scarf, Angela's fossils, each a fragment of a larger picture. The beer bottle, cold as if from an icebox, loomed in his mind, a clue that didn't fit any narrative yet. A knock at the door startled him. George entered, holding a telegram. "From Miss Le Marchant, sir," he said, handing it over. Poirot tore it open, reading Carla's words. "Found mother's diary in attic. Mentions a secret I must keep for love. Sending it tomorrow. Hope it helps." Poirot's moustache curled upward. A diary, Caroline's own voice might be the key to unlocking the riddle. He glanced at the letters, their voices clamoring for attention. "Patience, Mies, Amyas," he murmured. "The truth. She is like the fog's low to lift, but inevitable." He sat again, picking up Philip's letter, then Meredith's, then Elsa's, reading them anew. The discrepancies were deliberate. He realized not errors, but defenses. Each suspect had crafted their story to deflect suspicion, yet their truths bled through the cracks. Philip's resentment of Amyas's charm, Meredith's love for Caroline, Elsa's obsession, Cecilia's duty, Angela's guilt, they were all there, raw and human. As the clock struck midnight, Poirot lit a candle, its flame casting shadows. Terrace the letters. He began to sketch a chart, plotting each suspect's movements against the timeline. The garden, the studio, the laboratory, the greenhouse spaces where secrets had collided. The nursery rhyme, he saw now, was Caroline's own invention, a way to frame the suspects in her mind, perhaps to protect the one she loved most. The candle flickered, and Poirot's eyes gleamed. The truth was close, not in the letters' words, but in their silences. Tomorrow, with Carla's diary, he would confront the Piglets' final secret. For now, he closed his eyes, the rhyme lulling him into a restless sleep. And this little piggy cried wee, 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 all the way home. The fog thickened outside, but within Poirot's mind, the first rays of clarity pierced the haze. The letters were not just accounts. They were confessions, each a piece of the retrospective riddle he had sworn to solve.